The fluorescent glare of the upscale grocery store bore down like an interrogation lamp as Rebecca Mitchell stood at the bakery counter, her fingers trembling over the scattered collection of pennies, nickels, and dimes spread across the glass surface. Each coin represented a choice made earlier that week: gas or groceries, medicine or milk, electricity or eating. The marble floors beneath her worn sneakers gleamed with a polish that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Everything here cost more. The artisan sourdough loaves behind the counter were labeled at $12 each, the kind of bread that came with a story about heritage grains and small batch fermentation, the kind that assumed you had the luxury of caring about such things. Her daughter Emma, 6 years old with tangled brown hair and a jacket 2 sizes too small, pressed against her leg. The child had learned not to ask for things. That silence hurt worse than any tantrum. Rebecca's hands shook as she pushed the coins into small piles, recounting. $3.47. She had counted it twice at home, once in the car, and now here, hoping somehow the mathematics would shift in her favor. The cheapest loaf was $5. Behind her, she could feel the weight of stares from other shoppers, women in yoga pants that cost more than Rebecca's car payment, men in business casual checking their phones with the casual impatience of people whose time was genuinely valuable. She didn't belong here. She knew it. They knew it. She had come to this particular store in this particular neighborhood because it was on the way home from the free clinic where Emma had finally been seen for the cough that had lasted 3 weeks. The prescription waiting at the pharmacy would cost $32 even with the discount card, which meant the checking account would hit zero, which meant the utility shut-off notice would go unanswered another week. But Emma needed to eat. Children needed food every single day, regardless of bank balances or dignity. The woman behind the bakery counter, young and blonde with the kind of clear skin that suggested regular facials and 8 hours of sleep, stared at the coins with an expression somewhere between confusion and disgust. She looked over Rebecca's shoulder, clearly hoping someone else would handle this situation. This wasn't what she had signed up for when she took a job at Mercer & Klein, the city's most exclusive grocery chain. These were supposed to be easy customers. Pleasant customers. Customers who didn't pay in coins counted from a jar. Rebecca opened her mouth to ask if there was anything at all, for $3.47. Day-old bread. The discount rack. Samples. Anything to put something in her daughter's stomach tonight. That was when he appeared. The man moved through the crowd with the kind of unconscious authority that made people step aside without being asked. Mid-50s, salt and pepper haircut with precision, charcoal suit that fit like it had been made for his exact measurements, leather shoes that clicked against marble with the confidence of someone who had never counted coins. His face carried the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from stress and success in equal measure, sharp jawline, gray eyes that missed nothing, the faint lines of someone who smiled less than they should but meant it when they did. James Mercer had built his family's regional grocery chain into a national empire through what business magazines called ruthless efficiency, and what his competitors called cutthroat capitalism. 43 stores across 12 states, each one positioned in affluent neighborhoods where the median household income supported $15 organic chicken and imported olive oil. He had been visiting this flagship location for a quarterly walkthrough, the kind of unannounced inspection that kept managers sharp and employees terrified. He had been observing the bakery section's layout when he noticed the woman at the counter. At first, it was simply the anomaly she represented: wrong clothes, wrong posture, wrong everything for this environment. Then he saw the coins. Then he saw the child. Something tightened in his chest, an unfamiliar sensation he pushed away with practiced ease. He approached the counter with the calm of someone who owned not just this store but the very ground it stood on. The bakery clerk's face flooded with recognition and panic. Rebecca didn't look up, still counting coins with the desperate focus of someone solving an equation where the wrong answer meant hunger. "Is there a problem here?" His voice carried the neutral tone of someone asking about inventory, not watching a woman's dignity dissolve in real time. The clerk stammered. "Sir, Mr. Mercer, this customer is trying to, she wants." "I can see what she wants." He looked at Rebecca directly for the first time. Up close, he could see the dark circles under her eyes, the way her coat had been mended at the sleeve with thread that didn't quite match, the fact that her hands bore the rough dryness of someone who washed them frequently with harsh soap. Medical worker, maybe. Service industry. Someone who worked with their hands. The sourdough is $5. She has $3.47. Rebecca finally looked up, and the expression on her face made something crack in his carefully maintained composure. Not defiance. Not pleading. Just exhausted resignation, the look of someone who had already accepted defeat before the battle started. She began sweeping the coins back toward herself with one hand, the other reaching for Emma's shoulder to guide them toward the exit. "We'll go," Rebecca said quietly. "I'm sorry for the confusion." "Wait." The word came out sharper than James intended. Around them, other customers had slowed, sensing drama. This was better than shopping. "You're short $1.53 for the bread you want." The cruelty of stating the exact deficit hung in the air. Rebecca's face flushed red. Emma looked up at her mother with eyes too old for six, already learning what it meant to be inadequate in a world of plenty. "I understand," Rebecca managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll manage." James felt the attention of the growing audience. Felt the phone cameras potentially emerging. Felt the weight of his reputation in this moment. He had not built an empire by being soft. Charity was for galas and tax deductions, not for bakery counters in his own stores. There were systems for this. Food banks. Government programs. The social safety net that people like her were supposed to access instead of embarrassing themselves in establishments like his. And yet. "Tell me," he said, his voice carrying that same neutral assessment tone, "what exactly were you planning to do with one loaf of bread?" The question landed like a slap. Rebecca's flush deepened. Several onlookers shifted uncomfortably. One woman whispered to her companion, loud enough to carry, "Can you believe this? Just give her the bread or let her leave." But Rebecca answered, because the question had been asked, and she was too tired to be proud. "Make it last 3 days. Breakfast and dinner. Peanut butter if I can afford it at the regular store. Just bread if not." Emma pressed closer to her mother's leg. James studied them both with the calculated assessment he usually reserved for quarterly reports and acquisition targets. The child's jacket with its broken zipper held together with a safety pin. The mother's shoes with their worn heels, probably rotated as her only pair between work and everything else. The way they held themselves, not broken, not yet, but bent under weight that kept increasing. 1 loaf. 3 days. 2 people. He spoke as if confirming data points. Then he turned to the clerk, whose face had gone pale. "Tell me, how much product do we waste from this department daily?" The clerk stammered. I'm not sure of the exact." 43%. James didn't need to check notes. He knew every inefficiency in his operation. 43% of bakery items are disposed of unsold. Industry standard is 30. We're underperforming. He paused, letting that sink in for the audience that now included several other employees drawn by the commotion. And yet here we have a customer who wants to purchase our product, who will ensure zero waste of said product, and we're concerned about $1.53. The clerk opened her mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. "Sir, I was just following the pricing." "The pricing I set?" "Yes." James picked up the sourdough loaf Rebecca had been eyeing. Felt its weight. Probably cost 90 cents to produce. Marked up 1,300% because his customers paid for the story as much as the bread. "Here's what's going to happen." He placed the bread on the counter and pushed it toward Rebecca. Then he pulled out his wallet, Italian leather, probably worth more than everything Rebecca owned combined, and extracted 2 20s. He placed them on top of the coins Rebecca had been counting. "This customer," he said, voice carrying across the now silent bakery section, "is going to take this bread. She's also going to select anything else she needs from this store. The $40 covers it. Whatever's left is hers to keep." Rebecca stared at the money as if it might vanish. "I can't." "You can. And you will." He looked at her directly, those gray eyes holding something she couldn't quite read. Not pity. Not quite kindness either. Something else. Assessment, maybe. Calculation. Consider it a customer satisfaction initiative. We value every patron. The words were corporate. Hollow. But the $40 was real. Emma tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mama?" Before Rebecca could respond, before she could process the surreal reversal, James turned to the growing crowd of onlookers. His eyes swept across them with the practiced authority of someone who commanded rooms full of executives and shareholders. "I trust everyone here is finding what they need? The produce section has a special on organic avocados today. Excellent value." The crowd dispersed with uncomfortable speed, the show over, their phones returning to pockets. The bakery clerk stood frozen, uncertain whether she had witnessed generosity or been implicated in some kind of test she had failed. James turned back to Rebecca one last time. "Take your time shopping. No one will bother you." Then, quieter, so only she could hear, 3 days on 1 loaf is too long. Buy more." He walked away before she could thank him, before the tears threatening at the corners of her eyes could fall, before the moment could become more than it was, a transaction, nothing more. A problem solved through the application of resources. That was all. But as he moved toward the produce section, maintaining his inspection routine, something gnawed at him. The image of those coins on the counter. The child's two old eyes. The mother's exhausted resignation. He had seen poverty before, of course. Had donated to food banks and homeless shelters and all the appropriate causes. But always at a distance. Always mediated through galas and tax-deductible receipts and foundations with boards and mission statements. Never this close. Never this specific. Never looking directly into the face of someone rationing bread across 3 days. He found himself wondering, and immediately dismissing the thought, what combination of circumstances led a woman to count coins in his store? Medical debt, probably. Most Americans were one emergency away from financial collapse. The statistics were clear. He knew them. He also knew they weren't his problem to solve. He ran a business, not a charity. And yet he had given her $40. From your pocket, a voice in his head whispered. Not from the company. Not from some initiative or program. From your wallet. Why? He didn't have an answer. Didn't want to examine it too closely. It was $40. He spent more than that on lunch most days. The amount was meaningless. The gesture was simply pragmatic. Bad optics to have people counting coins in his flagship store. He had simply made a problem disappear in the most efficient way available. That was all it was. That was all it could be. But as he continued his walk through, nodding at displays and noting inventory levels, his mind kept returning to the bakery counter. To the coins scattered on glass. To the child with the broken zipper. To the mother who had answered his cruel question with honest desperation because she had no pride left to shelter behind. Behind him, at that same counter, Rebecca stood with $40 in her hand and her daughter pressed against her side. The bakery clerk had disappeared into the back. Other customers moved past with careful disinterest, eyes averted. And Rebecca began the unfamiliar task of shopping with actual money to spend, trying to calculate maximum nutrition for minimum cost, trying to understand what had just happened, trying not to shake as the adrenaline of humiliation slowly drained away. The bread sat on the counter between them. Just bread. But also everything. For 3 days it would mean Emma ate breakfast. For 3 days it would mean one less choice sacrificed. For 3 days it would mean survival. The man in the expensive suit was already gone, disappeared into his empire of marble floors and 43% waste, and Rebecca would never know that she had cracked something in him. Would never know that the coins she counted had counted for more than their face value. Would never know that sometimes the smallest moments carry the heaviest weight. She picked up the bread. It felt impossibly light in her hands. Behind her, Emma whispered, "Can we get peanut butter too?" Rebecca looked at the $40. At her daughter. At the store full of food that suddenly, impossibly, she could afford. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking on the word. "Yes, we can get peanut butter too." And somewhere in the produce section, a man who had everything continued his inspection, trying to forget the weight of coins he would never have to count. Asterisk stories like this spread through communities faster than anyone expects, shared in break rooms and grocery store parking lots, commented on by people who see themselves in the struggle or the rescue. Viewers from every background hit replay, subscribe to channels that remind them humanity exists in unexpected places, check description boxes for similar moments where dignity gets restored. They share because recognition matters. Because witnessing counts. Because somewhere, someone else is counting coins. Asterisk. Rebecca's hands still trembled as she pushed the shopping cart, an actual cart, not the hand basket she usually carried that limited her shame to portable quantities, down the aisle of pasta and rice. Emma walked beside her now instead of clinging to her leg, the child's cautious hope almost painful to witness. $40 stretched before them like an impossible feast, each dollar a decision about survival postponed, each bill a choice that usually didn't exist. She had been operating in crisis mode for so long that the simple act of selecting food without calculating every penny felt foreign. Her brain kept short-circuiting, reaching for the mental calculator that had become her constant companion, then remembering the bills folded in her jacket pocket. Real money. Enough money. She could buy peanut butter, the real kind, not the store brand that was mostly oil and sugar. She could buy pasta, rice, canned vegetables, oatmeal. Things that stretched. Things that lasted. Things that kept a 6-year-old growing. Other shoppers moved past her with their organic produce and grass-fed beef, their meal kits and imported cheeses, their casual abundance she had trained herself not to envy. She focused on Emma, on the list forming in her mind, on maximizing every dollar through strategies she had become expert in. Calories, percent, shelf stability, nutrition density, the mathematics of poverty. They were in the cereal aisle, Emma staring longingly at the colorful boxes she knew better than to ask for, when Rebecca heard the voices behind her. "Did you see that back there?" A woman's voice, low but carrying. "With the coins?" Mortifying. Another woman, this one with the vocal fry of someone who watched too much reality television. "I mean, who even carries that many coins? Banks exist. You'd think if she's that desperate she'd go to a normal grocery store. Food Lion. Walmart. Somewhere appropriate for her situation." Rebecca's face burned. She focused on comparing oatmeal prices, the cylindrical containers blurring in her vision. Emma had gone very still, developing that terrible skill of pretending to be invisible that no child should need. And then Mercer just gives her money? That's going to encourage this. Next thing you know we'll have panhandlers in the bakery section. I heard he gave her $40. 40. You know she's just going to spend it on. Rebecca abandoned the cart and moved to the next aisle, Emma's hand tight in hers. The women's voices faded but the words lingered like smoke. Appropriate for her situation. Panhandlers. Going to spend it on. The casual cruelty of people who had never counted coins, never rationed bread, never had to choose between feeding their child and keeping the lights on. She made it 3 more aisles before running into him again. James Mercer stood in the frozen food section speaking with his store manager, a nervous man in his 30s who kept nodding too enthusiastically at whatever the CEO was saying. Rebecca tried to reverse direction before being noticed, but Emma's voice carried across the aisle, "Mama, ice cream?" Both men turned. The manager's face cycled through recognition and concern. James's expression remained neutral, unreadable. He said something quiet to the manager, who immediately scurried away, and then James walked directly toward them. Rebecca wanted to disappear. Wanted to explain the cart full of practical items, prove she wasn't wasting his charity on frivolous things, demonstrate her worthiness of the $40 that suddenly felt like 40,000. Instead she stood frozen as he approached, his expensive shoes clicking against tile like a countdown. Finding everything you need. The same corporate tone from earlier. Professional. Distant. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. The words came out jumbled. She was being stupid. He probably regretted the whole thing. Probably wished she had just left. He glanced at the cart's contents. Rice. Pasta. Canned vegetables. Peanut butter, the good kind, she thought defensively, but not the expensive organic kind. Oatmeal. Bread. Nothing frivolous. Nothing that screamed waste or indulgence. The responsible choices of someone who knew hunger. His eyes moved to Emma, who stared back with that wide, assessing gaze children used when trying to understand adult behavior. How old are you? Emma looked at her mother for permission before answering. 6. Almost 7. Almost 7. He repeated it as if calculating something. Then, to Rebecca, she asked about ice cream. It wasn't a question, but Rebecca answered anyway. We don't need, we have enough, the money you gave us is for important things. Ice cream isn't important. The question threw her. Was he mocking her? Testing her? Trying to catch her being irresponsible with his charity? It's just, I need to be smart about every dollar. Right. Smart. Something shifted in his expression. Follow me. It wasn't a request. He turned and walked toward the frozen section, clearly expecting compliance. Rebecca hesitated, then followed, pulling Emma with her. What choice did she have? This was his store. His money in her pocket. His charity that could be revoked as easily as it had been given. He stopped in front of the ice cream freezer, the glass fogged with cold. Dozens of options lined the shelves, premium brands, exotic flavors, pints that cost $8 each. Emma's eyes went wide. Pick one, James said to Emma directly. The child looked at her mother. Rebecca shook her head minutely. They couldn't. It was wasteful. Frivolous. Not what the money was for. I'm not asking permission, James said, still looking at Emma. I'm telling you to pick one. Any flavor you want. Emma's face struggled between desire and training. She had learned not to want things. Had learned that asking led to the painful expression on her mother's face, the one that said I would give you the world if I could but I can't even give you this. But this man, this strange man in the expensive suit who had given them money, was telling her she could have something. Just have it. Because she wanted it. The cookie one, Emma whispered, pointing to a container with chunks of cookies and cream visible through the clay lid. James opened the freezer and pulled out the container. Handed it to Emma, who clutched it like treasure. Then he reached in and pulled out 3 more containers. Different flavors. More than one person could eat before it melted. More than made sense. "You can't," Rebecca started. "I can do whatever I want. It's my store." He placed the containers in her cart, their cold immediately fogging in the warmer air. Sometimes ice cream is important. Sometimes kids need things that aren't practical. Rebecca felt tears threatening again. This was worse than the coins somehow. The coins had been necessity. This was something else. This was acknowledging Emma as a child who deserved treats, not just a mouth to feed. This was generosity that went beyond calculation. "I don't understand," she managed. "Why are you doing this?" James looked at her directly for the first time since the bakery counter. "Neither do I." The honesty of it stunned them both. For a moment, the corporate mask slipped, and Rebecca saw something underneath. Not pity. Not charity. Something more complicated. Something that looked almost like recognition, though of what she couldn't say. The moment passed. He glanced at his watch, probably cost more than her car, and his expression reset to neutral professionalism. "Is there anything else you need? The pharmacy, for instance. You came from that direction." How did he? But of course he had seen them. Had probably been watching. Assessing. She should feel violated by the observation, but instead she just felt exhausted. "There's a prescription. $32. I have it covered." She didn't. The $40 had to stretch for food and the prescription, which meant less food, which meant back to calculating. But she couldn't take more. Couldn't be more of a charity case than she already was. "No, you don't." He said it with the certainty of someone who dealt in facts, not polite fictions. "The pharmacy is in this store. I'll have it billed to the company. We have a discretionary fund for employee benefits. You're not an employee, but the fund exists. It should be used." "I can't accept." "Yes, you can. You will." He pulled out his phone, typed something quickly. "What's your name?" "The prescription is under your name, I assume." She told him, defeat in every syllable. Rebecca Mitchell. The cough medicine for Emma. The doctor at the free clinic who had been kind but harried, seeing dozens of patients who all needed more than a 7-minute appointment could provide. He typed it in. Sent the message. Done. Just like that. Another problem solved through the application of resources. It'll be ready at the counter. No charge. Rebecca felt something crack inside her. Not gratitude, she was beyond gratitude, lost somewhere in the surreal space where humiliation and relief occupied the same breath. "You don't even know us. Why would you? We're nothing to you. Just people you saw. You could have just let me leave." "I could have." He pocketed his phone. "I almost did. I've let thousands leave. Tens of thousands probably. People short on money, people counting change, people who don't belong in stores like this." He gestured around them at the marble and the spotless displays and the casual luxury of it all. This empire was built on exclusivity. On making people feel special by making other people feel excluded. Premium pricing for premium customers. That's the business model. Then why? Because your daughter has a cough that lasted 3 weeks. Because you were going to make one loaf of bread last 3 days. Because you answered my question honestly when most people would have lied or left. He paused, something working behind his eyes. Because the coins added up to 3, 4 to 7 exactly, which means you counted them multiple times, and that level of desperation should not exist in a country this wealthy. The words hung between them. Political. Economic. An indictment of systems he benefited from. Rebecca didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know if agreement was allowed or if she was supposed to be grateful for the crumbs of acknowledgement. Emma hugged the ice cream container tighter, afraid it might be taken away. James looked at the child, and something in his face softened. "When I was young, younger than you, my grandfather owned a small grocery store. Nothing like this. A corner market in a working neighborhood. He extended credit to customers who were short. Kept a ledger of debts. Some people paid him back. Some didn't. My father thought it was bad business. Weak. Said giving away product destroyed profit margins." He looked back at Rebecca. He was right. It did. My grandfather died with dozens of unpaid debts. We absorbed the loss. Learned the lesson. Built this instead. He gestured around them again at the empire of efficiency and exclusion. But the people he helped, They came to his funeral. Hundreds of them. More people than I'd ever seen in one place. They told stories about how his credit got them through winter. How his kindness kept them fed. How he saw them as humans, not transactions. His voice had gone distant, remembering. My father said it was sentiment. Useless. That you can't build empires on kindness. And he was right about that too. You can't. This, he gestured at the store, this was built on the opposite. On calculating value and extracting maximum profit. On efficiency. Rebecca realized she was hearing something private. Something this man probably never said out loud. She stayed very still, afraid to break whatever moment this was. I haven't thought about my grandfather's funeral in years, James continued. But today, watching you count coins, I remembered. All those people whose names he had written in his ledger. All those debts forgiven. All that inefficiency. He looked at her directly. He died happy. My father died with much more money and much less peace. I don't know which one was right. They were both right, Rebecca said quietly. Just about different things. He considered that. Nodded slowly. Perhaps. But only one of them built something that lasted beyond sentiment. Or maybe the sentiment was what lasted, Rebecca offered. You still remember it. You're still thinking about it. That's lasting. For a moment, James Mercer, CEO, empire builder, man who had calculated his way to tremendous success, looked uncertain. Then the mask slipped back into place. Go get your prescription. Feed your daughter. The ice cream goes in the freezer within an hour or it degrades. He stepped back, creating distance. And Mrs. Mitchell? Next time you need bread, go to a regular store. One where you belong. This place, he gestured around, it's not designed for people in your situation. It's designed to make people feel inadequate. That's half the business model. Don't give us the satisfaction. He walked away before she could respond, his shoes clicking authority against marble, his posture perfect, his exit complete. Rebecca stood in frozen foods with her daughter and a cart containing ice cream and the shattered remains of whatever just happened. Emma tugged her sleeve. Mama? Can we go home now? Home. The apartment with the shut-off notice. The empty refrigerator they were about to fill. The prescription that would help Emma breathe easier. The ice cream melting in their cart. Yes, baby, Rebecca said, her voice thick. Let's go home. They checked out with a different clerk, one who processed their items with bored efficiency and no recognition. The total came to $38.17. Rebecca had $1.83 left from the 40. She held the bills and the receipt like evidence of something she couldn't quite name. The prescription was ready at the pharmacy counter, marked no charge, corporate account. The pharmacist handed it over with a professional smile that suggested this was routine, not miraculous. They walked to the car, a Honda with rust spots and a check engine light that had been on for months, loaded their groceries, and sat in the parking lot as the sun started its descent. Emma opened the ice cream container immediately, using her fingers since they had no spoon. Mama, it's so good, she said around mouthfuls of cookie cream. It tastes like birthday. Rebecca watched her daughter eat ice cream in a grocery store parking lot, this child who had learned not to ask for things, who had learned hunger and scarcity, who somehow still believed in birthday flavors. She thought about a man who built empires on exclusion who gave them ice cream. About grandfathers who died with debts unpaid and sons who learned the wrong lessons. About coins on a counter and the weight they carried beyond their monetary value. She thought about going back inside. Thanking him properly. Asking his name, except she already knew it. He had said it. Mercer. The Mercer of Mercer and Klein. The man who owned 43 stores designed to make people like her feel inadequate. Who bought her daughter ice cream because sometimes kids needed things that weren't practical. Emma finished half the container before Rebecca made her stop, afraid she would get sick. They drove home as evening came on, the car's heater only working on one setting, the prescription in a white paper bag on the passenger seat, the groceries in the trunk representing more food than they'd had in weeks. That night, after Emma had taken her medicine and eaten peanut butter on the expensive bread and fallen asleep in their shared bed, Rebecca lay awake thinking about a man who almost didn't help them. Who had built something that lasted on the opposite of kindness. Who remembered his grandfather's funeral after all these years. She thought about the $40. About the ice cream. About the prescription. About all of it. And she wondered if James Mercer had any idea that his moment of mercy, if that's what it was, had been witnessed. That phones had emerged from pockets. That recordings existed. That in the digital age, nothing stayed private. That kindness and cruelty alike could go viral, could be judged by millions, could transform a moment into a movement or a man into a symbol. She wondered if he knew what he had started. She wondered if she did. Outside, the city hummed with its usual indifference, and somewhere in a penthouse office or expensive home, a CEO probably wasn't thinking about coins on a counter or a child who asked for ice cream. Probably had moved on to the next problem, the next quarterly report, the next empire-building decision. Or maybe, just maybe, he was lying awake too. Thinking about grandfathers and funerals and ledgers full of debts. Thinking about $347 and $40 and the strange mathematics of mercy. But that was just hopeful thinking. The kind of sentiment that built nothing. The kind of inefficiency that his father had warned against. The kind of humanity that his grandfather had died believing in. Rebecca closed her eyes and tried to sleep, tried not to think about tomorrow and the bills still due and the choices still coming. For tonight, they had food. They had medicine. They had ice cream in the freezer that tasted like birthday. For tonight, that was enough. The video appeared online 36 hours later. Someone in that upscale grocery store, a bystander with a phone and a TikTok account hungry for content, had captured the entire encounter at the bakery counter. The footage was shaky but clear enough. Rebecca counting coins. The CEO approaching. The exchange. The $40 placed on the counter. The raw, unfiltered moment of human need meeting human response, all of it preserved in high definition and uploaded with the caption, "Billionaire CEO sees struggling mom in his store, watch what happens." By the time James's assistant brought it to his attention during his morning briefing, the video had accumulated 400,000 views. By lunch, 2 million. By the end of the business day, it had crossed 8 million and was climbing exponentially, shared across every social media platform, dissected on morning talk shows, analyzed by business commentators and social justice activists alike. James watched the video in his office overlooking the city, the 42nd floor of downtown's most expensive commercial building. His reflection in the window showed a man whose expression revealed nothing, even as his mind worked through the implications at computational speed. The footage showed him in decent light, giving money to a woman clearly struggling, telling her to take what she needed. It could have been worse. The conversation afterward about his grandfather, thankfully, hadn't been captured. But it could also have been better. It could have not existed at all. His phone lit up with messages. His PR team requesting an emergency meeting. Board members asking for context. Investors wondering about brand implications. His ex-wife sending a brief text, "Saw the video. Very unlike you. Call me." He didn't call anyone. Instead, he pulled up the full video again and watched it for the 5th time, studying not his own actions but Rebecca's face. The humiliation there. The resignation. The way she had tried to make herself smaller, invisible, appropriate for her situation. The way her daughter had learned not to ask for things. $3.47. 1 loaf of bread. 3 days. The mathematics haunted him more than the video's virality. His assistant knocked and entered without waiting for acknowledgement, one of the privileges of working for him for 12 years. "Sir, the PR team is insisting on a statement. The narrative is getting away from us." What narrative would that be, Catherine? That you're either a secret philanthropist or this was a publicity stunt. Half the internet thinks you're a saint. The other half thinks it's corporate image management. They're demanding to know which. Neither. He swiveled his chair to face her. Catherine Chen was 4 to 5, efficient to the point of ruthlessness, and one of the few people who would contradict him when necessary. It was impulse. Bad impulse. Inefficient. Inefficient generosity that's been viewed by 8 million people and counting. The sentiment is overwhelmingly positive. Your approval ratings, yes, someone actually polls that now, are up 43% since yesterday. Customers are posting about coming to Mercer and Klein specifically because of this. Traffic to our stores is up 11% this morning alone. James absorbed this information with the same neutral processing he applied to quarterly earnings. People are shopping at premium grocery stores because they saw me give a woman $40. They're shopping there because you were seen caring about someone. About a specific, real person in crisis. Not a donation to a faceless charity. Not a gala appearance. Real help to a real person caught on camera. Catherine pulled up her tablet, scrolled through comments. Listen to these, this is what billionaires should do. He didn't have to help but he did. Faith in humanity restored. My new favorite CEO. It's overwhelming positive. They don't know anything about it. About her. About why she was there. They know she was counting coins and you helped her. In America right now, that's enough. That's everything, actually. Catherine closed her tablet. The PR team wants to capitalize on this. Propose a formal program. Mercer Cares or something similarly branded. Assistance fund for customers in need. Turn this moment into a sustainable initiative. Institutionalized charity. James heard his father's voice in his own words. Build a program around inefficiency. Build a program around public perception, Catherine corrected. Which is currently very favorable and could translate to significant brand loyalty. The business case writes itself. James stood and walked to the window, looking down at the city 40 floors below. Tiny people moving through tiny lives, each one carrying burdens he would never see. How many were counting coins right now? How many making bread last 3 days? How many one emergency away from collapse? Statistics he had always known intellectually were becoming uncomfortably specific. What does she think about the video? He asked. Catherine's silence made him turn around. We haven't been able to reach her. No social media presence under that name. No immediate contact information. She's not accessible. She's poor, Catherine. The word you're avoiding is poor. Poor people don't always have phones with data plans and social media accounts. They're too busy counting coins. The bitterness in his voice surprised them both. Catherine recovered first. Would you like us to locate her? Offer compensation for the video? Legal has concerns about filming without consent, though the store's posted policies technically cover it. No. He said it too quickly, then moderated his tone. No compensation. No contact. She doesn't need to be dragged into whatever circus this becomes. He returned to his desk, to the comfortable territory of decisions and control. Tell PR no formal program. No Mercer Cares initiative. No capitalizing on this. Sir, the business opportunity. I'm aware of the opportunity. I'm also aware that turning a moment of basic human decency into a branded corporate program is exactly the kind of cynical calculation that makes people hate corporations in the first place. He pulled up his calendar, returning to the scheduled routine that governed his life. The video will fade. Internet attention spans are short. This time next week, no one will remember. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The video's momentum was building, not fading. By the next morning, it had crossed 20 million views. By week's end, 40 million. News outlets ran segments. Business schools used it as a case study. Church sermons referenced it. Politicians quoted it. The moment had escaped his control entirely, transformed from a specific act into a symbol people projected their own meanings onto. And Rebecca Mitchell, the woman at the center of it all, had no idea she was the subject of national conversation. She was at work. Rebecca's job was at Valley Vista Medical Center, one of the city's largest hospitals. Not as a nurse or doctor, those required degrees she couldn't afford and time she didn't have. She worked in environmental services. The clinical term for janitorial work. The people who cleaned the rooms after patients left, who mopped the floors and sanitized the surfaces and disposed of the biological hazards that kept everyone else safe. It was hard work. Physical work. The kind that left her back aching and her hands raw despite gloves. But it paid $11 an hour, offered basic health insurance after 90 days, and most importantly, it was stable. She had been there 8 months, her longest job since Emma was born. That stability mattered more than the wage or the difficulty. Stability meant planning beyond next week. Meant maybe, possibly, eventually climbing out of the hole. She was scrubbing a discharged patient's bathroom, the worst part of the job, the part that never got easier, when her supervisor found her. Mitchell. Break room. Now. Linda Vasquez was 50, compact and stern, a woman who had worked her way up from environmental services to supervisor over 20 years. She ran her department with military efficiency and had no patience for drama or excuses. Rebecca had learned to stay invisible around Linda, to do her work thoroughly and quickly and without complaint. Being summoned to the break room was never good. Rebecca followed Linda down the corridor, past nurses and doctors who didn't look at them. The cleaning crew was functionally invisible to most medical staff, and into the small break room with its flickering fluorescent lights and ancient coffee maker. 3 other environmental services workers were there, all holding phones, all looking at Rebecca with expressions she couldn't read. You want to tell me what this is? Linda pulled out her own phone and showed Rebecca the screen. It was the video. The bakery counter. The coins. James Mercer. Rebecca's face clearly visible as she counted change with her daughter pressed against her leg. Her stomach dropped. I don't know who filmed that. Everyone knows who filmed it. It's got 40 million views. You're internet famous. Linda's tone suggested this was not a good thing. You and some billionaire having a moment in a grocery store. People are commenting. Making judgments. Telling your story like they know anything about it. Rebecca felt the room tilt slightly. 40 million views. 40 million people had watched her worst moment. Her humiliation. Her daughter learning what poverty looked like in real time. I didn't know it was being recorded. I just needed bread. That's all. I was just trying to feed my kid. I know. Linda's voice softened marginally. But now everyone else knows too. And they're making it into something it wasn't. Some kind of heartwarming story about the kind billionaire. Some are calling it a publicity stunt. Others are saying you're lucky. That you should be grateful. I am grateful, Rebecca whispered. The money helped. We ate that week because of him. You ate that week because you work 60 hours between this job and your weekend shifts at the diner, Linda corrected. You ate because you budget every single dollar and make choices most people never have to think about. Don't let the internet turn you into some charity case rescued by a rich man's whim. The other workers nodded. They understood. Most of them lived similar mathematics, multiple jobs, constant calculations, perpetual exhaustion. The working poor, the invisible labor force that kept hospitals running and cities functioning while never quite earning enough to escape the trap. What do I do? Rebecca asked. Nothing. You do nothing. You don't comment, you don't engage, you don't let yourself become a symbol for whatever narrative people want to build. You work your shift. You take care of your daughter. You survive. That's what you do. Linda tucked her phone away. And for what it's worth, I'm glad someone helped you. I'm glad $40 made a difference. I just wish we lived in a world where $40 wasn't life-changing money for people who work as hard as you do. Rebecca returned to work, but the bathroom cleaning felt different now. The physical labor was the same, but her mind wouldn't settle. 40 million people. 40 million strangers who had seen her face, her shame, her daughter. What were they saying? What did they think? Did they see a struggling mother or a charity case? A human being or a symbol? Her phone, a cheap prepaid model she kept in her locker, showed 17 missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize when she checked it during lunch break. No messages, just the attempted calls. Probably reporters. Probably people wanting a statement or an interview or some kind of response to the video she hadn't known existed until 2 hours ago. She blocked the numbers and turned off the phone. That evening, after her shift and after picking up Emma from the after-school program she could barely afford, Rebecca returned to their apartment to find a news van parked outside their building. A reporter and cameraman stood near the entrance, waiting. She grabbed Emma's hand and walked past them quickly, eyes down, ignoring the cold questions. Mrs. Mitchell. Just a few words about the video. How has this changed your life? What do you want to say to James Mercer? Inside, she locked the door and closed the blinds. Emma, confused by the sudden attention, asked questions Rebecca couldn't answer. Why were those people there? What did they want? Was this about the ice cream man? The ice cream man. That's what Emma called him. The strange man in the fancy store who bought them ice cream. Rebecca made dinner, pasta with the good sauce they could finally afford, and tried to maintain normalcy even as her phone continued lighting up with blocked calls. Even as she wondered what James Mercer thought about all this. If he regretted it. If he was angry that a private moment had been broadcast to millions. If he blamed her somehow for the attention. She remembered his words, this place, it's not designed for people in your situation. It's designed to make people feel inadequate. That's half the business model. Don't give us the satisfaction. But the internet had given them satisfaction anyway. Had turned her inadequacy into content. Into clicks and shares and comments. Into meaning she never intended to create. Later that night, after Emma was asleep, Rebecca did what she had told herself she wouldn't do. She borrowed her neighbor's phone, Mrs. Chen, who was kind and asked no questions, and looked up the video. Watching it was surreal. Seeing herself from outside, seeing the moment that had felt like drowning from the perspective of a spectator. She looked smaller than she felt. More defeated. The camera caught Emma's two old eyes, her careful stillness, her trained expectation of disappointment. Then James Mercer entered the frame, and Rebecca watched his face as he approached. Watched the calculation there. The moment of decision. The precise instant when he chose to help instead of walking past. It happened fast, maybe 3 seconds between seeing her and deciding to intervene. 3 seconds that had now been analyzed by 40 million people. The comments were overwhelming. Thousands of them, arguing about wealth and poverty and responsibility and charity. About whether this proved billionaires cared or proved how broken the system was that $40 could matter so much. About whether Rebecca should be grateful or angry. About whether this was kindness or publicity. About everything except what it actually was, a specific moment between specific people making specific choices under specific circumstances. One comment caught her eye: this woman works at Valley Vista Hospital in environmental services. Makes $11 per hour. Single mother. This is what we pay the people who clean up after us when we're sick. This is what frontline workers survive on. The CEO's generosity could be solved by paying people living wages. Someone had researched her. Found her workplace. Posted her wage. Made her a data point in their argument about economic justice. She felt invaded. Exposed. Turned into ammunition for battles she hadn't volunteered to fight. Another comment, near the top: James Mercer's net worth, $2.3 billion. What he gave her, $40. That's equivalent to someone worth $50,000 giving 86 cents. This isn't generosity. This is pocket change. This is what gets called charity in America while the system that creates poverty stays intact. The mathematics made her sick. Not because it was wrong, but because it was right. The $40 that had changed her week was nothing to him. Less than nothing. A rounding error. And yet it had mattered. Had bought food and medicine and ice cream and a moment of breathing room in the constant crisis of poverty. Both things were true. It was simultaneously meaningful and meaningless. Life-changing and statistically insignificant. That contradiction seemed to be what the internet couldn't resolve. Rebecca gave the phone back to Mrs. Chen and went to bed, but sleep wouldn't come. She lay in the dark listening to Emma breathe, thinking about 40 million strangers who thought they understood her life based on 40 seconds of video. Thinking about a man who had helped on impulse and was now being canonized or condemned depending on which narrative people preferred. Thinking about coins on a counter and what they had counted for. The video wouldn't fade. James had been wrong about that. By the end of the first week, it had been viewed over 60 million times. Rebecca's face was recognizable to strangers on the street. The hospital put out a statement supporting their employee and declining further comment. The news vans eventually left her building, but the attention didn't stop. It just transformed. Strangers started approaching her at work, at the grocery store, at Emma's school. Most were kind. Some were invasive. A few were cruel. All of them thought they knew her story. All of them wanted to be part of it. And somewhere in his tower office, James Mercer watched his spontaneous act of mercy turn into something neither of them had intended. A viral moment that refused to die, a symbol that meant different things to different people, a crack in the carefully constructed wall between wealth and poverty that both of them had tried to maintain. Neither of them knew it yet, but the video was just the beginning. The real transformation was still coming. The mathematics of viral attention followed predictable patterns, but the consequences never did. Within 10 days of the video's release, James Mercer's company valuation had increased by 7%, not from operational changes or market conditions, but from pure sentiment. Customers flocked to Mercer and Klein stores specifically because of the video. They photographed themselves in front of the bakery counters. They posted about shopping there to support a CEO who cared. The brand had become associated not with premium exclusivity but with unexpected humanity, and it turned out that narrative sold products more effectively than any advertising campaign. His board of directors, initially concerned about the viral moment's unpredictability, now praised the accidental marketing genius. His quarterly presentation included slides analyzing the bakery counter incident and its positive impact on brand perception across key demographics. Someone had actually titled it that, the bakery counter incident, as if Rebecca counting coins was a strategic initiative rather than a woman trying to feed her child. James sat through the presentation with his customary neutral expression, nodding at the appropriate data points, answering questions about sustainability of the positive sentiment. Inside, something corrosive ate at him. They had turned Rebecca's humiliation into a profit center. Had quantified her desperation in terms of market share and brand loyalty. Had made her poverty into his company's success story. The efficient thing, the smart business decision, would be to lean into it. Launch the Mercer Cares program his PR team kept proposing. Install assistance funds at every store. Make charity part of the brand identity. Capitalize on the momentum. He rejected the proposal for the third time. Sir, His CFO pressed during a private meeting, "We're leaving money on the table." Consumer sentiment suggests a formal program would increase customer loyalty by 18 to 23%. The ROI is undeniable. The ROI of using people's suffering as a marketing tool. James's voice remained level, but something cold had entered it. "What's the projected return on dignity, Michael? Did you calculate that?" The CFO blinked. "I'm not sure I follow." Rebecca Mitchell didn't consent to being our brand ambassador. Didn't agree to have her worst moment turned into our corporate social responsibility initiative. Using her situation to drive profits without her involvement isn't generosity. It's exploitation. With respect, sir, you created the situation by helping her. That was your choice. We're simply suggesting we formalize what you started. I gave her $40. On impulse. Without calculation. That's not a business model. That's not something you scale. James stood, ending the meeting. No formal program. That's final. But even as he rejected the institutional response, he couldn't stop thinking about the individual one. About Rebecca. About whether the video had helped or harmed her. About whether his impulse had made her life better or just more complicated. His private investigators, a resource he had used exactly 3 times in his career, always for critical business intelligence, found her easily enough. Rebecca Mitchell, 29 years old, employed at Valley Vista Medical Center in Environmental Services. Single mother, 1 daughter Emma age 6. Resident of Parkside Apartments, Unit 2B, rent $1,400 monthly, currently 2 months behind. No car payment because she owned the vehicle outright, though repair costs had recently depleted her emergency savings. No credit cards, too risky when income was this unstable. Bank account with current balance, $87. The report included details that made James's jaw tighten. Her work schedule, 55 hours weekly between the hospital and weekend shifts at a diner called Mel's on Route 9. Her daughter's school, underfunded public elementary with a free lunch program Rebecca relied on. Her background, some college, interrupted by pregnancy and the subsequent departure of Emma's father, who had never paid child support and whose current location was unknown. Everything documented with clinical precision. A life reduced to data points that told a story of constant struggle against odds designed to keep people exactly where Rebecca was, working multiple jobs that together didn't add up to enough, stuck in the gap between poverty assistance programs and actual security. James closed the report and locked it in his desk. Then he did something he never did during business hours. He left the office. Valley Vista Medical Center sprawled across 12 acres of the city's east side, a regional hospital serving 250,000 residents. James had been here once before, years ago, when his father had died in the cardiac ward. He remembered the smell, antiseptic and illness and something indefinable that all hospitals shared. He remembered feeling helpless, which he hated, which he had converted into anger at the doctors who couldn't save a 73-year-old man from his 3rd heart attack. Now he walked through the main entrance with no clear plan beyond confirming Rebecca actually worked here. Beyond seeing if the viral attention had affected her employment. Beyond understanding whether his $40 had actually helped or just created different problems. The information desk directed him to environmental services on the 2nd floor. The supervisor's office had a small window and a nameplate reading Linda Vasquez. He knocked. The woman who answered was compact and stern, with the no-nonsense expression of someone who dealt with difficult situations as routine. Her eyes narrowed when she recognized him, everyone recognized him now, and she stepped into the hallway, pulling the door closed behind her. "Mr. Mercer." Unexpected. Her tone suggested it was also unwelcome. "I wanted to check on Rebecca Mitchell. To see if the video caused problems for her here." Linda crossed her arms. "You want to check on her now? After 40 million people watched her count coins? After reporters camped outside her apartment? After strangers started recognizing her at work?" "Yes. That's why I'm here. To understand the impact and whether there's anything I can do to mitigate it." "You can't unring that bell. The video is out there. Her face is public. Her poverty is now content for strangers to consume and comment on." Linda's voice was controlled but angry. She didn't ask for this. Didn't want attention. Just wanted to feed her kid. Your $40 helped for 1 week. The video might haunt her for years. The words landed like physical blows. James absorbed them without defense because they were true. Is she still employed here? Of course she is. Why wouldn't she be? She's one of our best workers. Shows up on time, does quality work, never complains. The kind of employee who keeps this hospital running while everyone else gets the credit. Linda's eyes hardened. We value her. Unlike the system that pays her $11 an hour to clean up biological hazards while people argue about whether your $40 gift was generous or insulting. It was inadequate, James said quietly. That's what it was. A bandage on a wound that needs surgery. Linda's expression shifted slightly, surprise breaking through the stern mask. Most rich people don't figure that out. They think charity solves problems instead of just treating symptoms. I'm not here to feel better about myself. I'm here because I need to understand what I actually did. Beyond the video. Beyond the viral moment. What was the real impact on Rebecca's life? Linda studied him for a long moment, some calculation happening behind her eyes. Then she sighed. She's working double shifts to catch up on rent. The landlord threatened eviction when the video went viral, said the media attention was disturbing other tenants. She's behind now because she had to pay him extra to not kick her out. So your $40 bought food that week. But the attention cost her $400 in security deposits and fees. Net impact, negative $360. The specific mathematics of it made James feel sick. He had helped and harmed simultaneously. Had bought her food and cost her housing security. The equations of poverty were vicious. Where is she now? Working. 4th floor, West Wing. Room 412 probably. That was her assignment this morning. Linda's expression hardened again. But I'm asking you, actually, I'm telling you, don't go up there. Don't make her job harder by showing up in your expensive suit while she's scrubbing bathrooms. She's already dealing with enough. I won't disturb her work. I just need, he stopped. What did he need? Absolution? Confirmation he had helped rather than harmed? To see her again and understand why this specific person, this specific moment, had cracked something in his carefully constructed efficiency? You need to feel better about your charity, Linda finished for him. That's what this is. You're not here for her. You're here for you. The accusation stung because it was partially true. Maybe. But I'm also here because the system that creates situations where mothers count coins is the same system I benefit from. I've spent my career optimizing efficiency and profit margins. Building an empire on exclusivity. And it works. It's successful. But watching her count 347, he stopped, the memory still sharp. Something about that specific number. The precision of it. She had counted those coins multiple times, probably at home, probably while Emma watched. Counted them knowing it wasn't enough but hoping somehow it would be. That level of desperation should not exist alongside the wealth we have. And I don't know what to do about that except try to understand it better. Linda's expression softened marginally. You want to understand poverty? Talk to the people who live it. But don't make them perform their struggle for your education. Don't turn their lives into case studies for your conscience. Fair enough. James pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card. When Rebecca has a break, if she's willing, I'd like to speak with her. Not here. Not at work. Somewhere neutral. I owe her an explanation about the video. About what's happened since. You owe her more than explanations, Linda said, taking the card. But I'll give her the message. Whether she calls is her decision. James nodded and turned to leave. Then stopped. Linda. Thank you for defending her. For protecting her from this. Most supervisors wouldn't. Most supervisors haven't lived what she's living. I have. 20 years ago, I was the one counting coins. Working 3 jobs. Choosing between rent and food. I survived because one person saw me as human instead of cost to be minimized. I won't let my staff be treated as less than they are. She closed the door, ending the conversation. James stood in the hallway for a moment, surrounded by the smell of antiseptic and the distant sounds of medical equipment, then left the hospital. The drive back to his office took 15 minutes through midday traffic. He spent it thinking about efficiency and cost and the human price of optimization. His phone showed 37 missed calls and twice that many emails, all requiring decisions only he could make. Problems to solve, opportunities to evaluate, the constant motion of running an empire. He handled them all with his usual precision, but the background hum of his mind stayed focused on a woman scrubbing bathrooms on the 4th floor of a hospital. Rebecca didn't call that day. Or the next. Or the day after that. James told himself that was fine, probably better, certainly the appropriate boundary. He had no right to expect her time or attention. He had already taken enough. But on the 4th day, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Sir, there's a Rebecca Mitchell on line 2. She says you're expecting her call. James stared at the blinking light for 3 seconds before answering. Put her through. Static, then her voice. Tired. Wary. Mr. Mercer. Linda said you wanted to talk. I did. I do. Thank you for calling. He realized he had no script for this conversation. No business framework for discussing how his charity had cost her money. I learned about your landlord. About the fees. I want to. You want to give me more money. Her voice was flat. Make it right. Fix the problem you created. Yes. If you'll let me. Silence on the line. Then, why? Because the math doesn't work otherwise. Because $40 bought you food but cost you $400 in fees. Because I've built a career on efficiency and that's a terrible return. Because, he stopped. Honesty demanded he finish. Because I can't stop thinking about you counting those coins. About Emma learning to not ask for things. About the fact that I live in a world where $40 is pocket change while you live in a world where it's groceries for a week. That shouldn't be possible in the same city. In the same economy. In the same country. More silence. Then, quietly, it's always been possible. You just didn't notice before. The truth of it hit hard. You're right. I didn't. I built systems that made people like you invisible. Designed stores to exclude you. Optimized profit at the expense of the people doing the actual work. I knew the statistics. Knew wealth inequality was increasing. Knew wages weren't keeping pace with cost of living. I knew all of it intellectually but never saw it. Never had to look at it directly. And now you have. Rebecca's voice carried something between bitterness and resignation. Lucky you. That must be really hard. Knowing poverty exists. What a burden. He deserved the sarcasm. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for a chance to partially correct a problem I contributed to creating. The landlord fees. The rent you're behind on. The security you've lost. Let me address those specific harms. And then what? You feel better? Go back to your empire knowing you helped one person? While the system that created my situation keeps creating more people just like me? I don't know, James admitted. I don't have an answer to that. But I know doing nothing is worse than doing something, even if something is inadequate. He heard her breathing on the other end. Heard someone talking in the background, hospital sounds. She was probably on break, using precious rest time to have this conversation. $400 would cover the landlord fees, Rebecca said finally. Another $800 would catch up the rent. $1,200 total would give me and Emma stable housing for another month. Is that what you're offering? Yes. And more. Whatever you need to actually be stable. Not for a month. Long term. I don't need long-term charity. I need a living wage. I need childcare that doesn't cost most of my paycheck. I need healthcare that doesn't bankrupt me when Emma gets sick. I need a system that doesn't require me to work 80 hours a week and still choose between rent and food. Can you give me that? No. I can't fix the system in one conversation. But I can address your immediate crisis while working on the larger problem. Working on it how? The question demanded specifics. James looked out his window at the city below, all those people in all those buildings, many of them living the same mathematics Rebecca did. I don't know yet. But seeing the problem is the first step to solving it. You made me see it. Now I have to decide what to do with that knowledge. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. Then, $1,200. For the housing. Nothing more. I'm not your charity project. I'm not your redemption arc. I'm just someone trying to survive who happened to end up in your store on a day you decided to help. Don't make it more than that. Understood. How do you want to receive the payment? Cash. I don't have a bank account that can handle deposits that size without questions. And I don't want records that might affect Emma's school lunch qualification or the assistance programs I might need later. The reality of her statement, that $1,200 could jeopardize access to other resources, illustrated exactly how broken the system was. You could work full-time and still need food assistance. Could accept help and lose other help. Could try to climb out and get pushed back down by bureaucratic cliffs built into poverty programs. Cash. When and where? They arranged to meet the following evening at a coffee shop near her apartment. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. James would bring the money. Rebecca would take it and leave. A transaction. Nothing more. After the call ended, James sat in his office as evening came on, watching the city lights begin to glow. $1,200 to solve a problem his $40 had helped create. A rounding error against his wealth. Life-changing money for Rebecca. Both things true simultaneously. The mathematics of inequality made no sense and perfect sense all at once. His phone buzzed with an email from his PR director. Mercer Cares program polling at 83% approval. Please reconsider implementation. Brand value implications significant. James deleted the email without responding. Some things couldn't be institutionalized. Some help had to remain specific, personal, inefficient. Otherwise it stopped being help and became something else. Something his grandfather would have recognized as the opposite of kindness. He pulled up the investigator's report one more time, reading through Rebecca's life rendered as data. Then he opened a new document and began writing. Not a business plan. Not a program proposal. Just notes. Observations. Questions about systems he had helped build and profits he had optimized and human costs he had never calculated. It wasn't much. Wasn't solutions. But it was acknowledgement. It was seeing. And seeing, he was learning, was sometimes where transformation began. The coffee shop Rebecca chose was called Grounds, a local place with mismatched furniture and decent prices where students studied and freelancers worked and people like her occasionally bought a single cup and made it last for hours because the warmth and Wi-Fi were worth the $3. James had never been inside a place like this. His coffee came from artisan roasters or executive break rooms, prepared to exact specifications, never consumed in spaces where the chairs had visible wear and the music was too loud. He arrived 15 minutes early, a habit from decades of business meetings where control of the space mattered. Ordered a black coffee, they didn't have his usual blend, just regular or dark, and sat at a corner table facing the door. Several patrons glanced at him, recognition flickering across their faces. The video's reach meant anonymity was no longer possible in most public spaces. But this neighborhood, working class and diverse, showed less interest in a billionaire CEO than his usual environments would. Here he was just another customer taking up space. Rebecca arrived exactly on time, wearing scrubs under her jacket. She must have come directly from a shift. Her face showed the exhaustion of someone working double time. She spotted him, hesitated for a moment at the door, then walked to his table with the determined stride of someone who had already committed to something difficult. Mr. Mercer. James. Please. James. She sat across from him, no preamble. You have the money? Direct. Efficient. No pretense of social niceties. He respected that. James pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket, set it on the table between them. $1,200. Cash. Unmarked bills, nothing traceable. Rebecca picked up the envelope, opened it, counted quickly. Her hands were rough from work, the nails short and unpolished. Practical hands. Hands that had scrubbed bathrooms and counted coins and held a daughter through struggles James would never fully understand. Thank you. She closed the envelope, put it in her jacket's inner pocket. Then she stood to leave. Wait. Please. 5 minutes. That's all I'm asking. She remained standing, poised for exit. Why? The transaction's complete. You gave money. I took it. That's the arrangement. Because I need to understand something. About that day. About why, he stopped, choosing words carefully. Why you were in that specific store. In that neighborhood. When there are cheaper options closer to where you live. Rebecca's expression hardened. You want to know why poor people sometimes make impractical choices? Is that the question? No. I want to know your specific reason. Your specific situation that day. Not as data. As a person. She sat back down slowly, something in his tone perhaps convincing her he meant it. Emma had been sick for 3 weeks. Coughing until she threw up. The free clinic finally had an opening. It's in that neighborhood. After the appointment, she needed food. She hadn't eaten all day because I couldn't leave work to get her lunch. Your store was on the way home. I knew it was expensive. But I thought maybe I could buy one thing. One small thing to hold her over until we got home. The bread. The bread. Which cost more than we could afford. But I was desperate and tired and Emma was hungry and I thought maybe. She stopped. I thought wrong. I was 3 to 7 short. I knew I would be. I counted those coins 6 times at home. But sometimes you do things anyway because the alternative is watching your kid go hungry. James absorbed this, each detail a small wound. The prescription. The medicine for her cough. I had it covered by the company. Did it help? Yes. She's breathing better now. No more throwing up. Rebecca's hand went to her jacket pocket where the envelope sat today. This, This helps too. More than you know. 2 months of stability. Time to catch up. Time to breathe. It's not enough. It's $1,200. It's rent. It's not having to choose which utility gets paid this month. It's enough. It's a temporary patch on a permanent problem. You'll still be working double shifts. Still counting every dollar. Still one emergency away from crisis. That's not enough. Rebecca's eyes flashed. What do you want me to say? That I need more? That I want you to solve all my problems? I'm not your redemption project. I'm not here to make you feel better about being rich. I know that. James leaned forward, voice low. But I need you to understand something. The system that put you in that store counting coins is the same system I've spent 30 years optimizing. I've made billions by keeping costs low, which includes labor costs. By positioning stores in wealthy neighborhoods where poor people don't belong. By creating inefficiencies that favor people who already have advantages. I know how capitalism works. I don't need you to explain it. I'm not explaining capitalism. I'm explaining culpability. My culpability. Every policy I've implemented to maximize profit has contributed to situations like yours. The $40 I gave you, the $1,200 I'm giving you now, it's blood money. Payment for sins I committed without seeing them as sins because the quarterly reports showed growth. Rebecca stared at him, something shifting in her expression. Why are you telling me this? Because seeing you count coins broke something in me. Made me realize I've been solving the wrong problems. I've been optimizing efficiency while people starve. Building empires while families count change. And I don't know what to do about that except start by acknowledging it to someone who's lived the consequences. Acknowledgement doesn't pay rent. No. But it's the first step to changing the systems that create the problem in the first place. And you're going to change those systems? Skepticism weighted every word. You're going to suddenly pay living wages and treat workers like humans? You're going to dismantle the empire you built on their backs? I don't know. Maybe. If I can figure out how to do it without destroying everything. If I can build something different. If it doesn't cost you too much. Rebecca stood again. Thank you for the money. Genuinely. It helps. But don't convince yourself that charity is change. Don't believe that seeing poverty makes you different from every other billionaire who's ever written a check to feel better about inequality they profit from. She walked away before he could respond. The envelope in her pocket. The $1,200 that was everything and nothing simultaneously. The weight of his attempted explanation hanging in the air like smoke. James sat alone at the corner table as the coffee shop continued its evening routine around him. Students typed papers. Freelancers took calls. Couples shared pastries. Normal life for people whose normal didn't include counting coins or scrubbing bathrooms or choosing between rent and food. He pulled out his phone and opened a notes app. Started writing. Not solutions, he had no solutions. Just questions. What would it cost to pay every Mercer and Klein employee a living wage? What would it do to profit margins? To shareholder value? To his personal wealth? What would it look like to redesign a business model around human dignity instead of maximum efficiency? The calculations were complex. The answers uncomfortable. A living wage meant higher costs. Higher costs meant higher prices or lower margins. Higher prices meant fewer customers or positioning changes. Lower margins meant shareholder pressure and board resistance and potential acquisition threats from companies that didn't care about ethics. Every solution created new problems. Every moral choice had practical consequences. The mathematics of doing good in a system designed around profit maximization were vicious. But Rebecca's face kept appearing in his mind. Her exhaustion. Her pride despite humiliation. Her daughter learning not to ask for things. The 3 4 to 7 counted 6 times because hope persisted even when mathematics said it shouldn't. James paid for his coffee, left a 20 for a $4 drink because the teenage barista probably needed it, and walked to his car. The drive home took him through neighborhoods he usually bypassed via highway, past buildings where people like Rebecca lived their mathematics. Past the hospital where she would work another shift tomorrow. Past the school where Emma learned alongside other children whose parents counted coins. He had seen these neighborhoods before without seeing them. Had known poverty existed without knowing it. The difference between data and specific humans was the difference between understanding and actually comprehending. His penthouse occupied the entire 43rd floor of downtown's newest luxury building. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Automated everything. Monthly costs that exceeded what Rebecca earned in 6 months. He had lived here for 3 years and never questioned whether the luxury was excessive. It simply was what it was. The natural result of success. Now it felt obscene. James stood at the window looking down at the city, all those lights representing all those lives, and wondered how many of them were counting coins right now. How many choosing between rent and food? How many working multiple jobs that together didn't add up to enough? How many children learning not to ask for things? The statistics said millions. The video had given one of them a face. Rebecca had given that face a voice. And now James carried the weight of seeing something he could never unsee. His phone rang. Catherine, his assistant. Sir, the board is requesting a meeting. They've seen preliminary numbers on the Mercer Cares program and want formal approval to proceed. The PR value alone justifies implementation. Tell them no. Sir, with respect, they are not asking. They are telling. The votes are there. If you don't approve it, they'll move forward anyway. You're CEO, but they control the board. James closed his eyes. Of course. He had built the company to be efficient. Had structured governance to prevent one person from blocking profitable decisions. Had created systems that would function with or without him. And now those systems were about to turn Rebecca's poverty into a branded marketing program whether he agreed or not. Schedule the meeting, he said finally. Tomorrow morning. I'll address their concerns directly. He spent that night preparing. Not a presentation, he didn't need slides to make his point. Just clarity about what he would and wouldn't accept. What lines existed that couldn't be crossed even for profit. What remaining pieces of his grandfather's legacy he could preserve in an empire built on the opposite principles. Rebecca spent that same night paying her landlord, counting out $1,200 in cash while the man leered and made comments about where she must have gotten that kind of money. She ignored him, got the receipt, returned to her apartment where Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table. Mama, did you get the rent money? I did, baby. We're good for another 2 months. From the ice cream man? Rebecca paused. The ice cream man. James Mercer, billionaire CEO, reduced to a character in a 6-year-old's narrative. The man who bought them ice cream when Mama didn't have enough money. Yes. From him. Is he a nice man? Was he? Rebecca didn't know how to answer that. He had helped them twice now. But he also profited from systems that created their desperation. He acknowledged his culpability but lived in luxury built on that same exploitation. He seemed genuinely troubled by their situation but his solutions were temporary patches on permanent wounds. I think he's trying to be, Rebecca said finally. I think he's figuring out what that means. Emma accepted this answer and returned to her homework. Rebecca made dinner, pasta again, but with meat sauce this time, an affordable protein now that rent was covered, and tried not to think about coffee shop conversations and blood money and men who saw problems they helped create and struggled with what to do about it. She tried not to wonder what happened next. Whether this was the end, 2 transactions, case closed, or whether something else was beginning. Something neither of them had intended but both of them now carried. The video had 4 to 7 million views now. The comments continued arguing about charity and systemic change, about whether James was hero or villain, about whether Rebecca should be grateful or angry. Strangers still approached her at work. Reporters still called occasionally, hoping for a follow-up interview. The viral moment refused to end. And somewhere in a penthouse overlooking the city, a man who had everything counted the cost of finally seeing what his success had been built upon. Counted it and found the mathematics devastating. Both of them lay awake that night, separated by geography and wealth and every social barrier that existed in America's divided landscape. But connected by a moment neither could escape. By $40 and $1,200 and $3.47. By coins on a counter that had weighed more than their monetary value. By the beginning of something neither yet understood but both would have to navigate. Tomorrow the board would vote. Tomorrow Rebecca would work another double shift. Tomorrow the video would gain another 1 million views. Tomorrow the world would continue spinning on its axis of inequality and injustice. But tonight, for just a moment, 2 people allowed themselves to imagine that seeing might matter. That acknowledgement might matter. That specific acts between specific people might add up to something larger. It was inefficient thinking. Impractical. The kind of sentiment that built nothing lasting. But it was also human. And sometimes that mattered more. The boardroom occupied the 42nd floor of Mercer and Klein headquarters, all glass and steel and the kind of furniture that communicated serious money before anyone spoke. 12 board members sat around the table, representatives of investment firms and founding family members and executives who had climbed through corporate ranks to reach this altitude. They controlled 63% of company voting shares. James controlled 37. The mathematics meant he could be outvoted on anything they unified around. They had unified around Mercer Cares. James entered to find the presentation already loaded on screens, slick marketing materials showing smiling families and community centers and all the visual language of corporate social responsibility. His PR director stood ready to walk through projections. The CFO had spreadsheets demonstrating ROI. They had built an entire program architecture in the 2 weeks since he had last rejected the proposal. Gentlemen. Patricia. James nodded to the lone woman on the board, Patricia Mercerchen, his cousin. I see we're prepared. We are. The chairman, Richard Hartley, gestured to the screens. The numbers are compelling. 18-month program implementation across all 43 stores. $5 million initial investment with projected return of $15 to $22 million in increased customer loyalty and brand value. The viral video created awareness. Mercer Cares converts that awareness into sustainable competitive advantage. James sat at his designated position, the head of the table. That meant he ran daily operations but didn't control strategic direction. Not anymore. Not when the board had votes and vision and very specific ideas about capitalizing on a moment he couldn't undo. Walk me through how it works, he said, voice neutral. The PR director advanced slides. Each store designates a discretionary fund. Employees can nominate customers experiencing hardship. We provide gift cards or basic assistance. Maximum $500 per case. All branded with Mercer Cares materials. Recipients agree to be photographed and have their stories shared, with appropriate privacy protections, across our social media platforms and in-store materials. You want to turn people's poverty into marketing content. We want to help people while building brand affinity, the PR director corrected. Studies show consumers, especially millennials and Gen Z, prefer brands with demonstrated social commitment. This program positions us as leaders in corporate responsibility. Using real people's desperation as advertising. Helping real people while documenting the impact, Hartley interjected. James, I understand your hesitation. But sentiment without structure is just impulse. You helped one person. We're proposing to help thousands. Systematically. Sustainably. James looked around the table. Saw heads nodding. Saw the consensus already formed. Saw his own powerlessness despite his title and his name on the building. What happens to Rebecca Mitchell in this program? The question landed in silence. The PR director glanced at her notes. She's not part of the formal program. Her situation predated the structure. Though we could approach her about being a spokesperson if. No. The word came out harder than James intended. She's not your spokesperson. Not your proof of concept. Not your story to tell. With respect, Patricia spoke up, her voice carrying the authority of family connection. She's already everyone's story. The video is public. Her face is recognized. Pretending she's private anymore is dishonest. She never consented to being public. Someone filmed her worst moment without permission. Turning that violation into a marketing opportunity is, James stopped. Found the word. Unconscionable. Helping people is unconscionable. Hartley's voice carried edge now. James, you're letting personal guilt cloud business judgment. We have an opportunity to do good while doing well. That's rare in retail. That's valuable. The vote is happening whether you approve or not. We're simply offering you the chance to lead the initiative instead of opposing it. James stood. Walked to the window overlooking the city. Saw the buildings and the streets and the people moving through their lives 42 floors below. Saw the hospital where Rebecca was probably working right now. Saw the systems he had built and the profits they generated and the human costs they externalized. My grandfather ran a corner grocery store, he said, still facing the window. Extended credit to customers who needed it. Kept debts in a ledger. Most people paid eventually. Some never did. My father thought it was poor business. Weak. He taught me that charity and commerce don't mix. That sustainable business requires boundaries between helping and operating. I built this company on that principle. Optimized for efficiency. Maximized profit. Kept emotions separate from economics. He turned back to face them. And it worked. We're successful by every metric that matters to shareholders. We've increased value consistently. We've expanded efficiently. We've generated returns that justify every decision we've made. Exactly, Hartley said. So why? Because watching Rebecca Mitchell count 347 in coins showed me what those returns actually cost. Showed me that the boundaries between helping and operating aren't clean. That the people who make our success possible, who clean our stores and stock our shelves and serve our customers, they're the ones counting coins. They're the ones choosing between rent and food. They're the ones whose labor we've optimized into poverty. That's the economy, not us, one of the other board members interjected. We pay market wages. We follow all regulations. We're not responsible for macroeconomic inequality. Aren't we? James looked directly at the man. We set wages at the minimum we can pay while maintaining adequate staffing. We schedule hours just below full-time to avoid benefit requirements. We position stores in wealthy neighborhoods and charge premium prices that exclude the people who actually need affordable food. Every one of those decisions contributes to the problem. Every one of them prioritizes profit over people. We are responsible. Not entirely, but partially. And partial responsibility is still responsibility. Silence around the table. Uncomfortable shifting. Patricia broke it. So what are you proposing? That we pay above market wages? Accept lower margins? Restructure our entire business model around charity? I'm proposing we acknowledge that sustainable business means sustainable communities. That if the people who work for us can't afford to eat, we're not paying enough. That if our customers are counting coins, our pricing is extracting too much. That optimization that creates poverty isn't actually optimal, it's just profitable in the short term while building long-term instability. Philosophical, Hartley said. But what does it mean practically? James returned to the table. Pulled out his phone and opened the notes he had been working on for 2 weeks. I've run numbers. Living wage across all positions, meaning enough to afford housing, food, healthcare, and basic stability in the markets where our stores operate, would require a 23% increase in labor costs. We could absorb 14% through operational efficiencies. The remaining 9% would require either price increases or margin reduction. I propose we accept the margin reduction. It would decrease annual profit by approximately $47 million. Still leave us with healthy returns. Still maintain competitive position. But it would mean 12,000 employees could stop counting coins. The number hung in the air. $47 million. A fortune. A rounding error against the company's total value. Life-changing money for 12,000 people. Pocket change for shareholders. You want us to voluntarily decrease profit by $47 million, Hartley said slowly. To pay above market wages. Because you feel guilty about a woman you saw counting change. No. I want us to pay fair wages because it's the right foundation for sustainable business. Because communities where workers earn living wages are communities where customers can afford to shop. Because treating people with dignity creates loyalty that marketing programs can't buy. Because it's the correct long-term strategy even if the short-term cost is real. And if we refuse, then I'll resign. You can implement Mercer Cares. You can turn poverty into content. You can continue optimizing profit while externalizing human cost. But you'll do it without me. Without my name attached. Without my endorsement. The threat landed. Several board members glanced at each other. Patricia looked shocked. Hartley's expression revealed careful calculation. You'd walk away from the company you built? From your legacy? Over wages. Over principles. My grandfather built a business on seeing people as humans first, transactions second. My father built a bigger business by reversing that. I built an empire by perfecting my father's model. But I'm my grandfather's grandson too. And I'd rather honor his memory than continue building on my father's foundation. Hartley leaned back. This is emotional decision-making. This is letting one moment dictate strategic direction. The board won't accept it. Then vote. Fire me if you have the authority. Proceed with your program. But understand that the moment that video was filmed, something changed. Not just for me. For public perception. For employee morale. For the social contract between corporations and communities. People are paying attention now. They're watching how we respond. Whether we exploit the moment for marketing or actually address the underlying issues. You can bet they'll notice which path we choose. They'll forget in a month, someone muttered. Maybe. Or maybe this is the moment that defines us. The inflection point where we choose between profit maximization and human dignity. Between short-term extraction and long-term sustainability. Between being another corporation that uses people or being a company that values them. James looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. I know which my grandfather would choose. I know which choice lets me sleep at night. What I don't know is which you'll choose. So vote. Let's find out. The silence stretched. Hartley called for a recess. The board members filed out to deliberate privately, leaving James alone in the conference room with its screen still showing Mercer Care's marketing materials. Smiling faces. Branded generosity. Poverty packaged for public consumption. He walked to the window again. Pulled out his phone and did something unprecedented. He called Rebecca. She answered on the third ring, surprise in her voice. James? I gave them a choice. Living wages or I resign. They're voting now. Why are you telling me this? Because you were right. Charity isn't change. Seeing isn't enough. Either I use the power I have to actually shift the systems or I'm just another billionaire writing checks to feel better about inequality I profit from. And if they vote against you? Then I walk away. Find another path. Maybe I don't know what yet. But staying and enabling exploitation I've now seen clearly, that's not an option anymore. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. You're risking everything over wages. I'm risking nothing. I have more money than I can spend in 3 lifetimes. Walking away from the company costs me ego, not survival. You risk everything every time you go to work. Every time you count coins. Every time you choose between Emma's medicine and rent. That's real risk. This is just discomfort. It's still something. It's the absolute minimum. It's what I should have done years ago when I had the data but not the faces. When I knew the statistics but hadn't watched someone count 347 in coins. He paused. Thank you. For what? For making me see. For counting those coins where I could watch. For being specific instead of statistical. For cracking something in me that needed cracking. I didn't do that for you. I was just trying to feed my kid. I know. That's why it mattered. Because it was real. Because you weren't performing poverty for my education. You were just living it. And sometimes witnessing reality is what finally makes it real. Through the glass, James saw the board members returning. They're coming back. I should go. Good luck. Thank you. And Rebecca? Whether they vote yes or no, I'm covering your rent. For the next 2 years. Non-negotiable. Call it blood money or restitution or investment in Emma's stability. But it's happening. James? 2 years. Enough time to find better work or get training or build savings. Enough time to stop counting coins. Argue with me later. They're here. He ended the call as the board members retook their seats. Hartley's expression revealed nothing. Patricia looked troubled. The others ranged from resigned to angry. We've voted, Hartley said. It was close. 7-5. But we have a decision. James waited. We're implementing living wage standards. 4 to 7 million in margin reduction accepted. Phase in over 6 months to minimize disruption. In exchange, you remain as CEO and lead the implementation. The Mercer Cares program is postponed for reconsideration after wage changes are complete. You wanted actual change instead of marketing. You got it. Don't make us regret it. James felt something release in his chest. You won't. I promise you won't. We'll hold you to that, Patricia said. But James? This is your legacy now. You've tied the company's future to a bet that dignity and profit can coexist. You better be right. My grandfather was right. I'm just finally learning the lesson. The meeting adjourned. James returned to his office and sat in the chair where he had made thousands of decisions over 3 decades. Pulled up the company-wide email system and began typing. TO, all Mercer and Klein employees. From, James Mercer, CEO. Compensation changes. Effective immediately, Mercer and Klein is implementing comprehensive wage restructuring across all positions. Over the next 6 months, wages will adjust to ensure every employee earns enough to afford stable housing, adequate food, basic healthcare, and genuine security in their local market. This means increases ranging from 15 to 30% depending on role and location. It means no employee working full-time for this company will need to choose between rent and food. No one will count coins for bread. No one will work double shifts just to survive. Some will question the business logic. Some will call it unsustainable. Some will predict failure. But I've learned that businesses built on the desperation of their workers are the ones that are truly unsustainable. That optimization that creates poverty isn't optimal. That dignity and profit aren't opposites. My grandfather built a grocery store on the principle that people matter more than margins. I forgot that lesson while building an empire. I'm remembering it now. To every employee who struggled while working here, I'm sorry. Sorry for setting wages at the minimum necessary rather than the maximum possible. Sorry for optimizing your labor into poverty. Sorry for building success on your sacrifice. This doesn't fix everything. But it's a start. He sent the email before he could second-guess the words. Before corporate communications could sanitize the message. Before lawyers could warn about liability or PR could worry about optics. Within 10 minutes, his phone exploded with calls. Media requests. Shareholder concerns. Employee responses. The message had leaked beyond internal channels within seconds, was being shared across social media, was being analyzed and praised and criticized in real time. The video had 49 million views now. James's email would be screenshot and shared to even more. The moment had grown beyond his control, beyond his intention, beyond anything he had imagined when he approached a woman counting coins 2 weeks ago. But maybe that was okay. Maybe some moments were supposed to escape control. Maybe some cracks were supposed to widen into actual openings. Maybe some seeing was supposed to lead to actual change. James looked out at the city as afternoon sun slanted through glass. Somewhere down there, Rebecca was working a shift. Soon she would see the email. Would understand that 12,000 people, including her, would stop counting coins. That wages would rise. That the system had shifted, even if just slightly, even if just within one company, even if just because one woman counting change had made one man finally see what he had been participating in. It wasn't enough. It was nowhere near enough. 43 stores couldn't fix American inequality. One CEO's conscience couldn't restructure capitalism. Wage increases couldn't solve healthcare or childcare or education costs or any of the 1,000 other ways the system failed people like Rebecca. But it was something. It was acknowledgement converted to action. It was seeing turned into policy. It was 3-4 to 7 counted on a counter leading to $4 to $7 million redistributed from shareholders to workers. It was a start. And sometimes starting was all you could do. The rest would have to be figured out step by step, decision by decision, person by person. James picked up his phone and called Rebecca one more time. It passed, he said when she answered. Living wages. 6 months implementation. Everyone. He heard her breath catch. Heard something that might have been a sob or a laugh or both. Heard her crying and trying not to and failing. I have to go, she managed. I'm at work. I can't go. I just wanted you to know. Wanted you to hear it from me. 3-4 to 7 mattered. You mattered. This is because you were willing to count those coins where I could see. She hung up without responding. James sat with his phone and his city view and the weight of decisions that couldn't be undone. Sat with the knowledge that he had finally, imperfectly, begun to honor the grandfather whose funeral he still remembered. Whose ledger full of debts had meant more than profit. Whose kindness had built nothing lasting except the memory of what business could be when it prioritized people. Maybe memory was enough. Maybe memory was the blueprint you followed when you finally understood what you had been building was wrong. Maybe memory was how you found your way back to the principles you should never have abandoned. James closed his eyes and imagined his grandfather watching this moment. Hoped the old man would be proud. Hoped the 4 to 7 million would make up for the 30 years of forgetting. Hoped that somewhere, a woman who counted coins would sleep better tonight knowing she would never have to count them again. The wage increases rolled out over 6 months exactly as promised. Every 2 weeks, another set of positions received adjusted compensation. Environmental services staff in week 3. Cashiers and stock clerks in week 7. Assistant managers in week 11. The implementation followed a careful schedule designed to minimize operational disruption while maximizing symbolic impact. Those who earned least received increases first. Rebecca's paycheck changed in week 3. From $11 per hour to $17. The difference transformed her monthly income from $1,800 to $2,800 before taxes. Almost $1,000 more per month. The kind of money that meant actual choices instead of forced calculations. She stared at the direct deposit notification for 10 full minutes before calling Linda Vasquez, who had received the same increase. Who was crying on the phone when Rebecca reached her. Who kept saying "I can't believe it" over and over like a prayer of disbelief and gratitude mixed into something wordless. That first month with the new wage, Rebecca did something she hadn't done in 6 years. She bought Emma new clothes. Not from the thrift store. Not handed down from neighbors. New clothes from an actual store with tags still attached and sizes that fit. She watched her daughter's face as she tried on jeans that weren't worn thin at the knees and shirts without mysterious stains and a winter coat with a zipper that worked. Emma stood in front of the fitting room mirror looking at herself in clothes that weren't old. "Mama, I look like the other kids." The statement broke something in Rebecca's chest. She hadn't realized Emma knew she looked different. Hadn't understood how much the child noticed about poverty's visible markers. Had hoped the adult awareness of class differences hadn't yet infected her daughter's world. But it had. Of course it had. Children noticed everything. "You look beautiful," Rebecca managed. "You've always looked beautiful." "I know. But now I look normal too." Normal. The word carried weight beyond clothing. Carried the accumulated burden of looking different, wearing different, being different. Carried the exhaustion of poverty made visible through material markers. Carried the hope that maybe, finally, they could stop standing out for what they lacked. They bought the clothes. Rebecca paid cash, old habit from when credit cards were impossible and debit cards meant overdraft fees, and felt the surreal lightness of spending money without the usual accompanying dread. This wouldn't mean choosing between electricity and food. Wouldn't mean another month behind on rent. Wouldn't mean counting coins. The security of it felt almost frightening in its unfamiliarity. That same week, James received the preliminary data on the wage implementation's impact. Employee turnover was down 37%. Productivity was up 18%. People who weren't exhausted from working 3 jobs performed better in the 1 job they now had. Customer satisfaction scores had improved. Even profit margins, despite the decreased labor extraction, remained healthy due to efficiency gains and reduced hiring costs. The business case for paying living wages was proving itself. But the personal impact was what haunted James. The stories that filtered up through management chains. The environmental services worker who paid off medical debt. The cashier who started taking college classes. The assistant manager who left her second job and saw her kids for dinner 5 nights a week instead of 2. The stock clerk who stopped relying on food assistance for the first time in a decade. 12,000 specific people whose lives had changed because he had finally chosen to value them over margins. Catherine brought him a folder of employee testimonials during a routine briefing. PR wants to use these in external communications. Show the human impact of the wage changes. Respond to critics who say it was unsustainable. James read through them. Saw names and faces and stories of transformation. Saw Rebecca's story repeated in variations across different people, different situations, same underlying mathematics of poverty escaped. Saw what $4 to $7 million in redistributed profit actually meant when it landed in hands that had been counting coins. "No," he said finally. "We don't publicize these. We don't turn their private relief into our public relations. Sir, it would significantly strengthen our position. Show that this worked. That other companies should follow our model. If other companies want to follow our model, they can. But we don't use our employees' poverty as proof of our virtue. We changed our policies because it was right, not because it generated positive press. These stories stay private." Catherine nodded, not surprised. James had been consistent about boundaries since the original video. Had refused every interview request. Had declined to make himself the face of corporate consciousness. Had kept Rebecca's name out of every statement about the changes. The video itself had reached 83 million views. Had become a cultural reference point. People used it in arguments about wealth inequality and corporate responsibility and the nature of charity versus systemic change. It had taken on meaning far beyond the specific moment it captured. Rebecca counting coins, James offering help, the collision of 2 different worlds in a grocery store bakery section. But the actual humans at the center had remained mostly invisible. Rebecca had given one interview, to a small labor advocacy publication, where she spoke carefully about wages and dignity and what it meant to stop counting coins. She had not mentioned James by name. Had kept the personal specifics private even while discussing the political implications. James had read that interview 5 times. Had memorized certain phrases. The system shouldn't require billionaires' mercy. It should require living wages. And, "I'm grateful for what I received, but I shouldn't have needed to receive it. No one should." She was right. And the wage increases, while significant for Mercer and Klein employees, didn't solve the larger problem. Didn't address the millions of other people still counting coins. Still working multiple jobs. Still choosing between rent and food. Still trapped in the gap between poverty assistance and actual security. James had started meeting with other CEOs. Quiet conversations over private lunches and golf courses and boardrooms. advocating for industry-wide wage standards, sharing data on Mercer and Klein's experience, building coalition for broader change. The response was mixed. Some listened. Some dismissed him as naive. Some suggested his personal guilt was clouding business judgment. Some agreed in principle but cited competitive pressures and shareholder demands and market realities that made such changes impossible for their companies. You had the luxury of private ownership, one CEO told him over dinner. You could absorb short-term margin loss because you answer to a small board. Public companies have quarterly earnings pressure. Institutional investors who demand maximum returns. We don't have the freedom you had. You have the freedom to choose values over returns, James countered. To decide that some things matter more than quarterly earnings. To build businesses that sustain communities instead of extracting from them. That's philosophy. This is business. Business is philosophy implemented. You've chosen extraction philosophy. I'm suggesting there's an alternative. The conversation had gone nowhere. Most of them did. But James kept having them. Kept pressing. Kept sharing data and stories and the simple mathematical reality that people who earn living wages were more productive, more loyal, more invested in their work. That exploitation was expensive in ways quarterly reports didn't capture. Some listened. A few even implemented their own changes. Regional chains and smaller companies that had the agility to shift faster than massive public corporations. Each one meant more people stopping counting coins. Each one meant progress. But it was slow. Grinding. Frustrating. James was learning that systemic change required patience he had never developed in decades of optimizing efficiency. Required coalition building and compromise and accepting incremental progress instead of immediate transformation. He was learning that seeing wasn't enough. Acting wasn't enough. Creating change required sustained effort over time, through resistance and setbacks and the constant pressure to revert to extraction models because they were easier and more profitable in the short term. 6 months after the wage implementation, James requested a meeting with Rebecca. Not about money. Not about the video. Just to talk. To understand how the changes had actually affected her specific life. To hear from someone who had lived both sides of the transformation. They met at the same coffee shop. Different table, same mismatched furniture, same background noise of students and freelancers and people living their various mathematics. Rebecca arrived in clothes that looked newer than last time. Her face showed less exhaustion. The constant edge of crisis seemed softened. You look different, James said. I sleep now. 6 hours most nights. Turns out that's what happens when you're not working 80 hours a week. Just one job. Just the hospital. I quit the diner. Quit counting every hour against what it would earn. Quit living in crisis mode. She ordered coffee, a larger size than last time, James noticed. Allowed herself the luxury of the extra $1. Emma's in after-school art classes now. She draws constantly. The teacher says she has talent. Real talent, not just parent-teacher conference politeness. That's wonderful. It's possible because I can afford the program. Because I pick her up at normal time instead of after dark. Because I'm not too exhausted to care about her drawings. Rebecca met his eyes. So yes, the wage increase changed our lives. Materially and meaningfully. You wanted to know the impact. That's it. We're still not wealthy. Still budget carefully. Still make choices. But we're not drowning anymore. We're just swimming. And sometimes that's everything. James absorbed this. Thank you for telling me. You paid for the privilege of hearing it. A slight smile took the edge off the words. 2 years of rent. Living wages. You bought a lot of information access. I bought nothing. I restored some of what should have been yours all along. There's a difference. Is there? From where I sit, it feels like bought relief. Purchased stability. I'm grateful. But I'm also aware that my security depends on your choices. That what you gave could be taken away by your successor or your board or your company's next strategic direction. I'm better than I was. But I'm not free. The honesty stung because it was accurate. What would freedom look like? Rebecca considered. Union representation. Contracts that can't be unilaterally changed. Wages tied to cost of living instead of executive discretion. Benefits that don't depend on corporate generosity. Political power for workers instead of just shareholders. She paused. System change, not individual mercy. No matter how well-intentioned the mercy is. You're organizing. Some of us are talking. Hospital workers. Grocery workers. service industry across sectors. Talking about what collective action might look like. What demands we might make. How to build power that doesn't depend on benevolent billionaires having moments of conscience. James smiled despite himself. I'm being made obsolete. You were always obsolete. You just didn't know it yet. Rebecca smiled back. But I'll admit, you're a better obsolete billionaire than most. At least you noticed us eventually. Because you made yourself impossible not to notice. Because you counted coins where I could see. I didn't make myself anything. I existed. You finally looked. That's on you, not me. They talked for another hour. About Emma's drawings and the hospital union discussions and whether James's wage advocacy would actually spread beyond early adopters. About the video's ongoing virality and what it meant that 83 million people had watched their moment while millions more lived similar moments in private. About whether individual action could ever add up to systemic change or whether the structures themselves needed dismantling before real transformation was possible. Neither had clean answers. Both had experiences that complicated simple narratives. James had power and resources but operated within systems designed to resist redistribution. Rebecca had moral clarity but lacked the institutional access to implement changes at scale. Between them sat the messy reality of how change actually happened, partially, incrementally, through combination of pressure from below and choices from above, never as clean or complete as either would prefer. What happens next? James asked as they prepared to leave. I keep working. Keep organizing. Keep building community with other people who understand this fight. Keep pushing for the changes you can't or won't make. Rebecca gathered her things. And you? Keep advocating. Keep pushing other CEOs. Keep trying to prove that dignity and profit can coexist. Keep honoring my grandfather's memory by actually implementing his values instead of just remembering them. That's noble. But don't confuse reform with revolution. Don't believe that kinder capitalism solves the problem capitalism creates. You're making life better for 12,000 people. That matters. But 40 million people watched our video. 12,000 is a fraction. The rest are still counting coins. I know. But 12,000 was zero before. Progress is progress even when it's incomplete. Progress is progress until it's used as excuse to avoid deeper change. Rebecca stood. But yes. 12,000 matters. I'm one of them. My daughter is one of them. The security we have now is real. So thank you. Genuinely. For seeing. For acting. For following through instead of just feeling guilty and moving on. She left before James could respond. Left him sitting in the coffee shop with cold coffee and the weight of honest assessment. She was right. About all of it. The limitations of his changes. The difference between reform and revolution. The thousands helped versus the millions still struggling. But she was also right that 12,000 mattered. That Emma's art classes mattered. That Rebecca's sleeping 6 hours mattered. That specific people's specific transformations mattered even when they didn't solve every instance of the larger problem. Both things were true. The changes were significant and insufficient. Meaningful and limited. Progress and distraction from deeper structural issues that required political action beyond any CEO's authority. James had learned to hold both truths simultaneously. To celebrate progress while acknowledging how far remained. To accept partial solutions while working toward comprehensive ones. To be grateful for what he could change while remaining clear-eyed about what he couldn't. It was harder than optimization had been. More complex than efficiency calculations. Required tolerance for ambiguity and incompletion that decades of business training had tried to eliminate. But it was more honest. More human. More aligned with the grandfather whose memory had haunted him since the bakery counter. James paid for both coffees, left another oversized tip, and walked back to his car. The city continued its evening routine around him. People heading home from work. Families buying groceries. Life continuing in its usual patterns while underneath, small shifts accumulated. 12,000 people sleeping better. One child taking art classes. One woman organizing her co-workers. One CEO learning that seeing required continuous choice, not one-time action. All of it adding up to something. Not revolution. Not complete transformation. Just progress. Imperfect, incomplete, but real. James drove home thinking about coins and wages and the distance between 347 and living security. Thinking about his grandfather's ledger and his father's empire and what he was building that might honor both while being wholly his own. Thinking about 83 million views and 12,000 lives and one woman who refused to be grateful enough to stop organizing. Thinking that maybe, just maybe, he was finally learning what business could be when it prioritized people. Even if the learning came decades too late. Even if the implementation was incomplete. Even if the system still needed dismantling beyond what he could accomplish. At least he was learning. At least he was trying. At least 12,000 people had stopped counting coins because he had finally chosen to see. It wasn't enough. But it was something. And sometimes something was all you could do while working toward everything. 14 months after the video, James received an invitation that surprised him. Valley Vista Medical Center was hosting an employee appreciation event, the first in the hospital's 40-year history. The invitation came from Linda Vasquez, who had been promoted to Director of Facilities Management, a newly created position that came with decision-making authority and significant salary increase. "You should come," Linda wrote in the email. "See what your example inspired. What the work is built from the foundation you helped create." James almost declined. Employee appreciation events weren't his domain. He had attended enough corporate functions to last a lifetime. But something in Linda's phrasing, "what the work is built," caught his attention. This wasn't about him. This was about what had happened after, beyond his initial actions. He needed to see that. The event was held in the hospital's renovated cafeteria on a Saturday afternoon. James arrived in casual clothes, jeans and a button-down instead of his usual suits, trying to blend into a crowd that would recognize him regardless of what he wore. The video had made him too recognizable for anonymity. But the recognition, when it came, was different than expected. People nodded. A few thanked him quietly. Most simply went about their conversations and celebrations, treating him as a guest but not the centerpiece. The event wasn't about him. That was immediately clear. The cafeteria had been transformed with decorations and food tables and a small stage where hospital leadership stood with microphones. But more striking was the display along one wall, a timeline documenting the past year's changes. Photographs and statistics and employee testimonials arranged chronologically. January, Mercer and Klein announces living wage implementation. February, Valley Vista Workers form organizing committee. March, first union meeting draws 200 employees. April, hospital administration agrees to wage negotiations. May, contract ratified, 18% average increase across service positions. June, benefits package expanded to include childcare assistance. July, Linda Vasquez promoted to director-level position. August, employee assistance fund established. September, scheduling reforms implemented. October, first employee appreciation event planned. The timeline continued with smaller victories and ongoing campaigns. But the arc was clear. James's wage increases had catalyzed broader action. Had shown workers that change was possible. Had provided a roadmap and proof of concept that organizers used to build power and extract concessions from hospital administration. Rebecca had been right. Individual action had mattered not as complete solution but as spark for collective organizing. James studied the timeline with something between pride and humility. His company's changes occupied one small section. The rest was workers building their own power, fighting their own battles, winning their own victories. He had opened a door. They had walked through it and built entire structures on the other side. Impressive, isn't it? James turned to find Rebecca beside him, wearing clothes significantly nicer than their previous meetings. Her hair was styled. She wore jewelry, nothing expensive, but intentional. The transformation wasn't just economic. It was visible confidence, the bearing of someone who no longer lived in constant crisis. "It's remarkable," James agreed. "You did this. We did this. Hundreds of us. Organizing meetings and contract negotiations and pressure campaigns. You gave us proof it was possible. We did the work to make it real." The timeline says wages went up 18%. That's significant. It's survival. Cost of living increased 11% in the same period. Real wage growth is 7%. Better than nothing. Not enough to call it winning. Rebecca smiled. But it's progress. And it came from our organized power, not management generosity. That matters. That's sustainable. A woman approached them, young, maybe mid-20s, wearing hospital scrubs. "Rebecca? It's almost time." "Thanks, Yolanda." Rebecca turned back to James. "I'm speaking. As part of the program. Representing the organizing committee. You should stay." The program began with hospital administration offering platitudes about valuing employees and commitment to partnership. James recognized the corporate language, meaningless words designed to sound supportive while committing to nothing. But the audience listened politely, waiting for what came next. What came next was Linda, taking the microphone with the confidence of someone who had fought for her position and earned it. We're here because work is organized. Because we stopped accepting inadequate wages and disrespectful treatment. Because we built collective power and demanded change. She gestured to the timeline. It started with seeing that change was possible. That billion-dollar companies could pay living wages if they chose to. That worker value could be recognized in paychecks, not just appreciation speeches. She introduced several workers who shared their stories. The single father who could now afford childcare. The older woman who no longer needed a second job. The young man who started taking nursing classes because he finally had time and stability to imagine a different future. Then Rebecca took the stage. James had never heard her speak publicly. Had only seen her exhausted and desperate and then cautiously hopeful in their private conversations. Now he saw her addressing 200 co-workers with clarity and conviction. 14 months ago, I was counting coins for bread. Working 80 hours a week and still couldn't feed my daughter adequately. Living in constant crisis where one emergency meant catastrophe. She paused, letting that reality settle. That changed because my employer decided workers deserved living wages. But here's what's important, it changed because they decided. Our security depended on their choice. Our dignity required their generosity. That's not sustainable. That's not justice. That's charity. The audience murmured agreement. James felt the critique land personally. She was talking about him without naming him. About the limitations of his approach. So we organized, Rebecca continued. We built union representation. We negotiated contracts that can't be unilaterally changed. We established power that doesn't depend on benevolent billionaires having moments of conscience. We created structures that sustain beyond individual generosity. She detailed the organizing campaign. The meetings in church basements and living rooms. The one-on-one conversations building solidarity. The strategic pressure on hospital administration. The contract negotiations. The victories and setbacks. The ongoing work of maintaining worker power. We're better than we were, she concluded. But we're not finished. Wages need to keep rising. Benefits need expanding. Working conditions need improving. We have power now. We use it to keep fighting. That's what sustainability looks like. Not one-time raises from conscious CEOs. Ongoing worker power that demands dignity as a right, not a gift. The applause was thunderous. James joined it, recognizing the truth of her critique even as it complicated his own narrative. He had been proud of the wage increases. Had seen them as solution. But Rebecca was naming them correctly, as temporary intervention that required structural follow-through. A spark, not fire. After the speeches, people mingled and ate catered food and celebrated in ways that felt earned rather than provided. James stayed at the margins, observing. Watching Rebecca move through the crowd with easy familiarity. Watching workers who had counted coins now eating decent food and talking about their children's futures and planning next organizing campaigns. Linda found him near the exit. You're leaving without saying goodbye? I don't want to make this about me. This is their victory. Their work. True. But you're part of the story whether you're comfortable with it or not. The timeline includes you. The organizing started with proof you provided. Linda studied him. Rebecca was hard on you in her speech. She was accurate. Charity isn't justice. Individual mercy isn't systemic change. I needed to hear that. And yet you gave 12,000 people living wages. Started conversations that led to broader changes. Proved it was economically viable. That mattered, even if it wasn't complete solution. Both things are true, James acknowledged. I helped and I was insufficient. The changes mattered and they weren't enough. I don't know how to hold both truths simultaneously except to accept them and keep working toward better. That's called growth. Keep doing it. Linda smiled. And James? Thank you. For seeing. For acting. For not demanding gratitude or recognition. For letting the workers build on your foundation instead of claiming ownership of their work. She walked away before he could respond. James stood alone near the exit, watching the celebration continue. Watching Rebecca laugh with co-workers. Watching people whose lives had changed in part because he had counted $40 insignificant but in larger part because they had organized and fought and built power together. He slipped out quietly, returning to his car in the parking lot. The drive home took him past familiar landmarks now carrying new meaning. Past the grocery store where everything started. Past buildings where thousands of people lived their various mathematics. Past the city spread below his high-rise, all those lights representing all those lives. His phone showed emails from other CEOs asking about the wage implementation results. Media requests about speaking engagements. Shareholder reports showing continued profitability despite labor cost increases. The machinery of business and advocacy and reputation management. But underneath all that, something quieter. Rebecca's speech echoing in his mind. Dignity as a right, not a gift. The distinction mattered. Everything he had done still operated in the gift framework. Generous maybe, but ultimately discretionary. Revocable. Dependent on his continued choice. What would business look like if dignity was structural? If worker power was assumed rather than granted? If the system operated from foundation of justice rather than hoping for occasional mercy from conscience-struck executives? James didn't have answers. But he had new questions. Better questions than the optimization calculations that had governed his career. Questions his grandfather would recognize. Questions that required rethinking everything he had built. That night, in his penthouse with its city views and its luxury he still hadn't reconciled with his new understanding, James made a decision. He called his attorney. I want to restructure company ownership. Convert Mercer and Klein to employee ownership trust. Transfer majority control to workers over the next 5 years. Make them shareholders in the real sense, not just recipients of wages I set. The attorney sputtered. James, that's essentially giving away your company. Your wealth. Your control. This requires serious consideration and I've considered it. I've spent 14 months watching workers build power from scratch because they couldn't depend on my choices. I'm making a different choice now. Giving them the ownership they've earned through their labor. Making dignity structural instead of discretionary. Draw up the paperwork. This will take months. Years possibly. The legal complexity alone. Then start now. I want it irrevocable. I want them to own what they've built. I want my grandfather's model scaled beyond corner stores. I want to prove that profit and worker ownership can coexist. That's the next experiment. He ended the call before the attorney could argue further. Sat with the magnitude of the decision. He would still be comfortable, still have more money than needed. But the empire would no longer be his. Would belong to the people who actually made it function. Would operate on principles of shared ownership instead of extracted profit. It was radical. Risky. Possibly foolish by conventional business standards. It was also right. James walked to the window and looked down at the city. Somewhere down there, Rebecca was putting Emma to bed. Somewhere, Linda was planning the next organizing campaign. Somewhere, 12,000 workers were living the security he had finally chosen to make structural. Somewhere, his grandfather's ghost was finally resting, knowing the ledger had been balanced. That the lessons of corner store kindness had found their way into corporate policy. That mercy had transformed into justice through slow, imperfect, but genuine change. James pressed his hand against the glass, feeling its coolness. Feeling the distance between 43 floors up and ground level where actual life happened. Feeling the gap he had spent 14 months trying to bridge. The video had 91 million views now. Would probably hit 100 million eventually. Would live forever on the internet as the moment a billionaire helped a struggling mother. Would be analyzed and debated and referenced long after everyone involved was gone. But the real story wasn't in those 40 seconds. It was in what came after. In the wages raised and unions formed and ownership transferred. In the workers who built power and the executives who chose to share it. In the slow accumulation of small changes that added up to something resembling justice. In Emma's art classes and Rebecca's organizing and Linda's promotion and 12,000 people sleeping better. In the transformation of one man who finally, belatedly, insufficiently, learned to see. That story was still being written. Would continue being written long after James was gone. Would be completed by people who hadn't been born yet, fighting battles not yet imagined, building on foundations laid today. All because a woman counted coins where a man could see. All because that man chose, imperfectly, to respond. All because workers refused to accept charity as substitute for justice and organized to demand both. All because sometimes seeing mattered. Sometimes acting mattered. Sometimes admitting insufficiency and working toward better mattered. Even when it came decades late. Even when it was incomplete. Even when the system still needed revolutionizing beyond what any individual could accomplish. James turned from the window and returned to his desk. Opened a new document and began writing. Not a business plan. Not a policy. Just a letter. To Emma. To be delivered when she turned 18. Explaining the video she would undoubtedly see. Explaining what her mother's desperation had created. Explaining that her childhood poverty had catalyzed transformation beyond their family. Explaining that she mattered. That her mother mattered. That the coins counted to 347 had weighed more than their monetary value. Had weighed enough to tip scales toward justice. Had changed one man's trajectory and, through him, 12,000 lives and, through them, movements not yet born. Had proved that seeing could matter when followed by action. That individual choices could spark collective change. That hope was sometimes justified even in systems designed to crush it. Dear Emma, your mother counted coins where I could see. That changed everything. This is what came after. This is what your struggle created. This is why your poverty mattered beyond its own tragedy, because it cracked something in me that needed cracking. Because it showed me what I had been refusing to see. Because it made abstraction concrete and statistics human. You will inherit a world still fighting these battles. Still struggling toward justice. Still choosing, one decision at a time, whether dignity matters more than profit. Choose dignity. Always. Your mother taught me that. Now I'm teaching you. With gratitude and hope. James Mercer. He saved the letter. Sealed it in an envelope. Gave instructions for its delivery a decade from now when Emma would be old enough to understand. Then he returned to the work. To the restructuring plans and organizing support and building coalition for broader change. To the slow, grinding, essential work of transformation. To honoring the coins that counted for more than 347. To becoming, finally, imperfectly, his grandfather's grandson. 3 years after the video, Rebecca stood in front of her own apartment. Not the cramped 2-bedroom in Parkside where she and Emma had counted coins. A 3-bedroom in a better neighborhood with a functioning heating system and windows that actually sealed and a landlord who fixed problems within days instead of months. Still not luxury. Still carefully budgeted. But comfortable. Stable. Secure. Emma was 9 now, growing into a child who remembered poverty but wasn't defined by it. Who took art classes twice weekly and showed genuine talent that teachers nurtured instead of just noticed. Who had friends whose parents worked various jobs but all earned enough to stop counting coins. Who was learning that stability was normal, not exceptional. Rebecca's wage at Valley Vista had increased 3 more times through union-negotiated contracts. She now earned $23 per hour, managed a small team, and had healthcare that actually covered Emma's needs without bankrupt-breaking copras. She had savings, actual savings in an account that grew instead of depleting with every emergency. She had recently started taking online classes toward a degree in healthcare administration, paid for by the hospital's expanded education benefits. Her life looked nothing like the desperation captured in those 40 seconds of video. The transformation was visible in her clothes, her apartment, her daughter's confidence, her own facial expressions that no longer carried constant crisis tension. But she remembered. Deliberately. Refused to let stability erase the memory of what counting coins felt like. Refused to become comfortable enough to stop organizing. Refused to accept her own escape as sufficient when millions still lived the mathematics she had escaped. She had become a union leader. Not officially elected, that would come later, but recognized by co-workers as someone who understood both the struggle and the strategy needed to address it. Someone who had lived poverty and learned organizing. Someone who wouldn't settle for partial victories when comprehensive change was possible. Tonight was a planning meeting. 20 union members gathering in her living room to discuss the next contract negotiation. To build strategy around wages and benefits and working conditions. To flex the collective power they had spent 3 years developing. The meeting started with updates on organizing campaigns at other hospitals. Valley Vista's union had become model for healthcare workers across the region. 5 other facilities had successfully unionized using similar tactics. 3 more were mid-campaign. The movement was spreading through networks of workers who saw what was possible and decided to make it real in their own workplaces. Linda Vasquez, now Director of Community Engagement at Valley Vista, another position that hadn't existed before workers demanded it, facilitated the strategy discussion. Next contract negotiation opens in 4 months. We need clear demands. Realistic but aggressive. What are our priorities? The conversation flowed through familiar territories. Wage increases tied to inflation. Expanded healthcare coverage. Childcare assistance. Scheduling protections. Paid family leave. Each demand backed by research and member surveys and careful calculation of what administration could afford versus what they would claim was impossible. We should demand profit sharing, one member suggested. Valley Vista's parent company showed record earnings last quarter. Workers should share in that success. Murmurs of agreement. Rebecca took notes, organizing demands by priority and feasibility. Building the architecture of negotiation that would happen over months of meetings and pressure campaigns and possible strike authorization. Her phone buzzed during a lull in conversation. A message from an unknown number. * Rebecca, this is James Mercer. I hope you don't mind the contact. I wanted to share that the employee ownership transition is complete. Workers now own 51% of Mercer & Klein. Thought you'd want to know. No response necessary. Just wanted you to see what your coins counted toward. Rebecca stared at the message. She had heard rumors about the ownership transfer. Had seen news coverage of the unprecedented move. But hearing it directly from James, framed as completion rather than publicity, hit differently. Employee ownership. Workers controlling their own company. The model Rebecca had advocated for but never expected to see implemented at scale. Not from someone like James. Not from a billionaire CEO who had built wealth on extraction. And yet, here was the message. Here was the proof. She typed a response, * congratulations to them. Not to you. They earned it through their labor. You just stopped stealing it. *. Then deleted it. Too harsh. Also not entirely fair. James had done more than stop extraction. He had transferred actual ownership. Had given up control and wealth most people in his position would fight to death to preserve. That deserved acknowledgement even if it didn't deserve gratitude. She tried again, * thank you for telling me. This matters. Not just for your workers but as proof for everyone else organizing. Shows it's possible. Appreciate you following through. *. Better. True. Sent it before she could overthink. The meeting continued around her. Discussion of strike fund building and community coalition development and media strategy. The machinery of worker power that she and hundreds of others had built from nothing. From desperation converted to organization. From counting coins to counting votes and building leverage. After the meeting, after everyone left, after Emma was asleep and the apartment was quiet, Rebecca pulled up the video. She did this sometimes. Not often, maybe once every few months. Watched herself from 3 years ago counting coins with shaking hands. Watched her daughter pressed against her leg learning inadequacy. Watched James Mercer approach and make his choice. 98 million views now. A cultural artifact. A teaching tool in business schools and economics classes and organizing trainings. A symbol people projected meaning onto depending on their politics and their experiences and their hope or cynicism about whether change was possible. But for Rebecca, it was just a moment. A specific, terrible, real moment when she had been drowning and someone had thrown a rope. Not salvation. Not solution. Just enough help to catch breath and start swimming toward shore. Everything after had been her swimming. Her organizing. Her building power with co-workers who understood that charity wasn't sustainable but collective action was. Her refusing to accept escape as endpoint when it could be starting point for broader transformation. She read comments sometimes, when she needed reminder of why the work mattered. * My mom worked 3 jobs when I was growing up. I saw this video and cried because I remembered watching her count change just like this. Now she's union and earns living wage. This moment started something that helped my family. *. I'm a CEO and I watched this video 12 times before deciding to convert my company to worker cooperative. Best decision I ever made. Profitability up, turnover down, everyone happier. Mercer was right. *. This video radicalized me. Showed me that poverty exists alongside obscene wealth and the only reason is choice. We choose this system. We can choose different. Been organizing ever since. *. The video had become bigger than the moment it captured. Had catalyzed changes in thousands of workplaces and millions of lives. Had proved to workers that change was possible and to executives that generosity was profitable and to organizers that visibility mattered. All because someone had filmed without permission. All because the internet had amplified a private moment into public teaching tool. All because 98 million people had witnessed desperation and responses to desperation and learned something from it. Rebecca still hated being the face of poverty porn. Still resented that her worst moment was content for strangers' consumption. Still wished she could have counted those coins in privacy. But she couldn't deny the ripple effects. Couldn't ignore that her humiliation had accidentally created leverage for organizing campaigns across the country. Couldn't pretend that the video's existence wasn't useful even if its creation was violation. Both things were true. She could hate being filmed and acknowledge the video's positive impact. Could wish for privacy and recognize the strategic value of visibility. Could hold the complexity without resolving it. Her phone buzzed again. James responding to her message. *, you're right. They earned it. I just stopped stealing it. But I want you to know, none of this happens without you counting those coins where I could see. You changed me. You changed 12,000 workers' lives directly and hundreds of thousands indirectly through the movements your example inspired. That's your legacy. Thank you. *. Rebecca read it twice. Felt the strange mixture of emotions that James always inspired. Appreciation and frustration. Recognition of his efforts and awareness of their limitations. Gratitude for changes made and anger about years of extraction that preceded them. She didn't respond. Didn't know what to say that would capture the complexity. Instead, she returned to her organizing documents. To the contract demands being developed. To the strategy for next negotiation and the coalition building happening across healthcare facilities and the political advocacy needed to support worker power at systemic level. To the work that mattered more than any individual's redemption arc. To the collective power that sustained beyond viral moments and conscious billionaires and temporary interventions. To the future being built by workers who refused to accept charity as substitute for justice. Emma's art hung on the walls now. Drawings and paintings that showed real skill developing. Showed a child who had stability enough to imagine futures beyond survival. Who could create instead of just endure. Who would inherit a world still fighting these battles but would have tools Rebecca never had, education and security and models of what worker power could accomplish. Rebecca looked at the drawings and thought about generations. About what she was building for Emma and Emma's children and all the children whose parents were currently organizing in hospital break rooms and grocery stores and warehouses across the country. About the long arc of justice that bent slowly but actually bent when people put their weight on it. When they organized and demanded and refused to accept inadequacy as inevitable. James had helped. Had put his weight on the arc in ways that mattered. But he was one person applying one lever at one moment. The real weight came from millions of workers deciding they deserved dignity. Millions organizing simultaneously across thousands of workplaces. Millions refusing to count coins when they could demand wages instead. That was the transformation that actually changed systems. That was the legacy being built in meetings and negotiations and contract ratifications and strike authorizations and all the unglamorous machinery of worker power. Rebecca was part of that. Not the face anymore, thank God, but one organizer among thousands. One worker who remembered counting coins and refused to let anyone else have to. One person putting weight on the arc. She opened her laptop and returned to drafting contract demands. To the specific, detailed, practical work of transformation. To wages and benefits and working conditions spelled out in negotiable terms with research backing and member support and strike threat if necessary. To building the world where no parent counted coins for bread. Where all children took art classes if they wanted to. Where stability was right, not privilege. Where dignity was structure, not gift. The video would hit 100 million views eventually. Would live forever on the internet. Would be watched by people not yet born who would need reminding that change was possible. But the real legacy wasn't in views or visibility. It was in the contracts negotiated and the wages raised and the companies converted to worker ownership and the children who grew up never knowing what counting coins felt like. It was in the ordinary, essential work of making justice structural. And that work continued. Tonight. Tomorrow. Next year. Next decade. One contract at a time. One workplace at a time. One organizing conversation at a time. Until counting coins was history instead of reality. Until the video became artifact of solved problem instead of ongoing crisis. Until the work was done. Rebecca returned to her documents, building the future one demand at a time. 5 years after the video, James Mercer stood in a high school gymnasium in the working-class neighborhood where his grandfather's corner store had once operated. The building was gone now, replaced decades ago by a chain pharmacy. But the community remembered. Still had people who recalled the old man with the ledger, the grocer who extended credit and forgave debts and treated poverty with dignity instead of contempt. James had been invited to speak at a community organizing training. Not as CEO, he had stepped down from that role 2 years ago when the employee ownership transition completed. Not as billionaire, he had donated most of his wealth to a foundation supporting worker cooperatives and union organizing campaigns. As someone who had learned, belatedly and imperfectly, that business could be structured around people instead of the other way around. The audience was mostly young people. Organizers in their 20s learning tactics and strategy. Workers from various industries seeking tools to build power in their workplaces. Students studying labor movements and economic justice. People who knew the video, everyone knew the video, but didn't necessarily know the follow-through. Rebecca was there. She sat in the front row next to Linda and several other Valley Vista organizers who had become regional labor leaders. She had agreed to speak as well, sharing the workers' perspective on transformation. Telling the story of what happened after the viral moment ended. James noticed Emma sitting with Rebecca. 12 years old now, nearly unrecognizable from the 6-year-old in the video. Confident. Articulate. Wearing a shirt that said "My mom is a union organizer" in proud block letters. She sketched in a notebook while waiting for the event to start, her artistic skill obvious even from a distance. The moderator introduced James with efficient biography, former CEO of Mercer & Klein, architect of industry-leading living wage implementation, pioneer of employee ownership transition, current advocate for worker cooperative models and labor organizing support. The resume of someone who had changed course midstream and spent the remainder following new current. James took the microphone and looked out at 200 faces waiting to hear why a former billionaire was standing in a high school gym talking about worker power. 5 years ago, I watched a woman count coins for bread in one of my stores. She had $3.47. She needed $5. The bread was marked up 1,300% from production cost. My company policy required the employee to refuse her unless she had full payment. He paused. I gave her $40. The internet called it generosity. It was actually delayed conscience. Murmurs in the audience. Rebecca's expression remained neutral. She had heard him speak before, knew his self-deprecating framing. Knew it was honest but also strategic, acknowledging privilege and culpability disarmed criticism. That $40 changed very little for her. She bought food for 1 week. But watching her count coins changed everything for me. Made me see what my optimization had created. Made me understand that efficiency measured in profit margins was actually inefficiency when it produced poverty among the workers creating that profit. He detailed the wage implementation, the board resistance and eventual approval, the employee ownership transition that followed, the ongoing advocacy for cooperative business models, the foundation work supporting organizing campaigns, the complete restructuring of his understanding of what business could and should be. But here's what matters, James continued. None of that would have sustained without workers organizing. Without unions and contracts and collective power that didn't depend on my enlightenment. I could have changed my mind again. Could have reverted to extraction when quarterly pressures increased. Could have convinced myself that one-time generosity was sufficient. Only worker power made the changes permanent. Only organization made dignity structural instead of discretionary. He gestured to Rebecca. The woman who counted coins is here. She's going to tell you what actually mattered. Not the viral video. Not the billionaire's conscience. The organizing that happened after. The power built by workers who refused to accept charity as substitute for justice. Listen to her. She's the real story. Rebecca took the stage as James sat down. She had become a practiced public speaker over 5 years of labor organizing. Comfortable with microphones and audiences and the responsibility of representing workers' perspectives. James is right about one thing, she started. Worker power is what mattered. Everything else was temporary intervention. Helpful temporarily, but not sustainable. What sustained was the union we built. The contracts we negotiated. The political coalition we formed. The power we exercised collectively. She detailed the Valley Vista organizing campaign. The hospital's resistance and the workers' persistence. The strike authorization that brought management to the negotiating table. The contract wins that secured not just wages but dignity, scheduling protections, healthcare coverage, childcare assistance, paid leave, grievance procedures, seniority rights. All the machinery that converted temporary gains into permanent structures. And it spread, Rebecca continued. 5 years later, 18 healthcare facilities in this region are unionized. Wages across the sector have risen because non-union facilities have to compete for workers. Working conditions have improved because we set standards that became expectations. We built power that changed the industry, not just our workplace. She looked directly at James. That happened because the video proved change was possible. Because seeing a CEO pay living wages gave workers proof that the supposedly impossible was actually just inconvenient for management. Because the publicity created leverage we used in organizing conversations. The video mattered. But only because we converted visibility into organization. The audience asked questions. About tactics and strategy. About overcoming resistance and building solidarity. About translating individual actions into collective power. About whether billionaires could be allies or were inherently obstacles to justice. Rebecca handled that last question directly. Some billionaires can be useful. They have resources and platforms and access that organizers lack. But they are not allies in the real sense. Allies share risk and consequences. Billionaires sharing money they don't need isn't risk. It's discretionary charity that can be withdrawn. She glanced at James. Some are better than others. Some genuinely try to restructure systems instead of just treating symptoms. But ultimately, worker power doesn't depend on benevolent billionaires. It depends on workers organizing and demanding and building leverage through collective action. James nodded his agreement. He had learned this lesson thoroughly. Had learned that his role wasn't to save anyone but to stop extracting from them. Wasn't to be hero but to stop being villain. Wasn't to lead transformation but to support the actual transformers, workers organizing themselves. After the formal program, people mingled and networked and shared organizing strategies. James found himself surrounded by young organizers with questions about converting businesses to cooperative ownership. He shared what he knew, the legal structures, the financing models, the governance challenges, the cultural shifts required. Shared contact information for attorneys and consultants who specialized in worker cooperative transitions. Emma approached him while he talked with a group. Waited politely for a pause in conversation, then spoke, "Mr. Mercer? I wanted to thank you. For helping my mom that day. For changing things so she didn't have to work so hard." James knelt to be eye level with her. "You're Emma. I remember you from that day. You were 6. I remember too. I was hungry and scared and Mama was crying even though she tried to hide it." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact, stating history without dramatics. Now she's not scared anymore. She's strong. She teaches other people how to be strong like her. Your mom was always strong. She just didn't have the security to show it safely. That's what poverty does, forces people to hide their strength behind survival. That's what she says too. Emma paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you regret it? Being less rich now? Giving away your money?" James considered the question seriously. "No. I regret not doing it sooner. Regret spending 30 years extracting wealth from workers instead of sharing it with them. Regret optimizing profit while people counted coins. The money I gave away wasn't really mine. It was value created by workers that I had captured through legal but unjust systems. Returning it wasn't generosity. It was correction." Emma absorbed this. "Mama says you're one of the good ones. But that we still need to change the system so we don't need good ones. We need good systems." "Your mama is absolutely right. Good people in bad systems create bad outcomes. We need to change the systems, not hope for enough good people." James smiled. "You're lucky to have her as a mother. She's teaching you important things." "I know." Emma returned to her sketch pad, the conversation apparently complete. Rebecca joined him as Emma walked away. "She's direct. Gets that from me. She's remarkable. You've raised her well. Given her security and education and values that will serve her whole life. I gave her what every child deserves. Food and stability and the freedom to develop her talents instead of just survive." Rebecca looked at her daughter sketching across the room. "That shouldn't be remarkable. That should be normal. The fact that it's not is why the organizing continues." "How much longer do you think it will take? The organizing. The transformation. Until the system actually changes?" Rebecca laughed, not unkindly. "That's a rich person question. Poor people don't think about endpoints. We think about next contract, next campaign, next generation. The work doesn't end. It just evolves. Right now we're building worker power in healthcare. Next decade it'll be retail or manufacturing or tech. Next century it'll be industries we haven't imagined yet. The system will always need transforming because power always tries to reconcentrate. Organizing isn't project with completion date. It's ongoing commitment to justice. That's exhausting. That's life. At least now I'm exhausted from organizing instead of from working 3 jobs. At least the exhaustion has purpose and hope attached. That's progress. They stood together watching the gymnasium full of organizers networking and strategizing and building coalition. Watched Emma sketching and Linda coordinating and dozens of workers learning tools to build power in their own workplaces. Watched the machinery of transformation operating one conversation at a time. The video hit 112 million views last week, James said. Still climbing. Still being shared. Still teaching people that change is possible. And still making me watch my worst moment forever, Rebecca counted. Still turning my poverty into content. Still reducing complex transformation to 40 seconds of viral simplicity. She sighed. But yes. It helps with organizing. Gives us proof point. Shows workers what's possible. I've made peace with being the face of something larger than myself. You were always larger than that moment. The moment just gave the world a chance to see. Maybe. Or maybe the moment was exactly what it looked like, a desperate woman counting coins and a guilty billionaire offering temporary help. Everything after, we built. Workers built. Through organizing and negotiating and striking and all the unglamorous work that doesn't go viral. Both things are true, James offered. The moment mattered and the work mattered. Neither was sufficient alone. Together they created transformation. Together with millions of other workers organizing in thousands of other workplaces having millions of other moments that didn't get filmed, Rebecca corrected. We're part of something larger. One node in a network. One story among thousands. Important to us, but not exceptional in the broader movement. James accepted the correction. Accepted his place as supporting character in a story whose real protagonists were workers organizing themselves. Accepted that his transformation, while real, was less significant than the systemic changes workers had forced into being through collective action. Accepted that sometimes the most important thing powerful people could do was step aside and support rather than lead. Was resource rather than savior. Was acknowledgement that they had been problem, not solution, and the actual solutions came from those who had lived the problems directly. The event wound down. People exchanged contact information and made plans for future collaboration. The organizing network grew stronger, more connected, more capable of coordinating action across workplaces and industries. Emma showed her mother a sketch she had completed during the event, a detailed drawing of the gymnasium filled with people, each figure distinct and specific, all of them connected by lines representing relationships and solidarity and the invisible bonds of collective power. That's beautiful, baby, Rebecca said, studying the detail. It's us. All of us. Building something together. Emma pointed to specific figures. That's you. That's Linda. That's Mr. Mercer. That's me. We're all part of it. All connected. Rebecca hugged her daughter, this child who understood intuitively what many adults struggle to grasp, that transformation was collective, not individual. That power came from connection, not isolation. That change required everyone participating, not heroes saving passive recipients. James watched them and felt the weight of 5 years of learning settle into something approaching peace. He had helped. Imperfectly, belatedly, insufficiently, but genuinely. Had converted seeing into action, action into systemic change into ongoing support for workers building their own power. Had become, finally, his grandfather's grandson. Had honored the memory of ledgers and forgiven debts and corner store kindness by scaling those values into corporate structures. Had learned that efficiency measured in human dignity was more sustainable than efficiency measured in profit margins. Had learned that watching someone count 3, 4 to 7 could matter more than earning 3 billion. That specific people mattered more than abstract optimization. That business could be structured around values instead of the other way around. Had learned, simply, to see. And having seen, to act. And having acted, to sustain. And having sustained, to support others doing the same. It wasn't redemption, he didn't believe in redemption for 30 years of extraction. It was correction. Ongoing, imperfect, but genuine effort to repair harm and build different. That was all it could be. That was all it needed to be. The gymnasium emptied slowly. Rebecca gathered her materials. Emma packed her sketch pad. Linda coordinated rides for organizers without transportation. The community that had gathered dispersed back to their specific struggles and specific workplaces and specific campaigns. But the connection remained. The network strengthened. The movement continued. 5 years after coins counted on a counter. 5 years of wages raised and unions formed and companies restructured and organizing campaigns spreading across industries. 5 years of transformation that started with 40 seconds of video and extended through thousands of hours of unglamorous organizing work. 5 years of proving that change was possible when workers demanded it and powerful people stopped blocking it. 5 years of progress that was simultaneously significant and insufficient. Meaningful and incomplete. Worth celebrating and worth continuing beyond celebration toward deeper structural transformation. Rebecca and Emma walked to their car, a newer model now, reliable and safe, paid for with union wages and stable employment. James walked to his own car, less expensive than 5 years ago, appropriately scaled to someone who had chosen values over luxury. They drove in different directions through the same city. Through neighborhoods where some people still counted coins and others had stopped. Through the geography of inequality that organizing was slowly, imperfectly reshaping. Above them, clouds gathered for evening rain. The city's lights began illuminating as dusk approached. Life continued its usual patterns while underneath, fundamental shifts accumulated. The video would live forever. Would be watched by future generations learning about this moment in labor history. Would be analyzed in economics classes and organizing trainings and business schools. But the real legacy wasn't in views or virality. It was in the contracts negotiated and the companies restructured and the children who grew up with stability their parents never had. Was in Emma's drawing of connection. In Rebecca's organizing. In James's transformation. In 12,000 workers who stopped counting coins and thousands more organizing to do the same. Was in the ordinary, essential, ongoing work of building justice one workplace at a time. The work continued. Would continue tomorrow and next week and next decade and beyond. Until the system actually changed. Until dignity was structural. Until no parent counted coins for bread while billionaires counted profits in the same economy. Until the work was done. And even then, even after, the work would continue. Because justice wasn't destination. It was direction. It was commitment. It was choice made daily to value people over profit. It was what Rebecca had shown James by counting coins where he could see. It was what Emma would carry forward into generations not yet born. It was what mattered. The rain began as Rebecca pulled into her apartment parking lot. As James reached his building downtown. As organizers across the city returned home from the training carrying new tools and renewed commitment. The rain fell on everyone equally, as water always did. Washing the city clean. Nourishing what would grow. Making everything possible that hadn't been before.